I have spent my life surrounded by the sound of stadiums that shake the air itself. The roar is a living thing that rises and falls like the tide. 'Tis followed me from city to city and season to season. Yet the older I became, the more I realized that the true sound that defines the modern National Football League is not the roar of the crowd or the thud of collisions or the chant of a loyal fan base. It is the silence that comes after a secret escapes into the world through a glowing screen. A silence so sharp and immediate that even the loudest arena feels small in comparison. This is the silence that belongs to the new National Football League. A league where truth and rumor race at the speed of light, and where the line between private and public no longer exists. There was a time when stories stayed inside the locker room. Words spoken in anger or fear or exhaustion evaporated before sunrise. Mistakes stayed between teammates. Arguments ended when the players returned to the field. But that era had a final season, and it ended the moment a simple phone became more powerful than any shield stitched on a jersey. It ended when a single tap could turn a conversation into a headline and a joke into a scandal. From that moment forward, the National Football League entered an age where the loudest noise was created by quiet. Moments that were never meant to be heard. I remember the first time I watched a player learn that his private message had been leaked. The clip of that moment never went public, but the memory still feels as clear as if it happened this morning. He was sitting on a bench after practice, sweat dripping from his face, hands folded in front of him. He thought he was dealing with an ordinary text thread, the kind players exchanged every day about film sessions and soreness and little frustrations. But someone had taken his words and passed them to the wrong person. Within minutes, they reached social media. Within an hour, they were the talk of sports talk radio. By sunset, his words had been twisted, cut apart, and remade into something far more damaging. He did not speak for the rest of the day. He just sat there, staring at his phone, listening to the quiet. That silence was heavier than any hit he ever took on the field. It was the realization that there was no escaping the world outside anymore. Privacy was no longer a protective layer. It was a thin thread that could snap without warning. And he understood something that players all across the league would eventually learn. That the game behind the game had become the real source of fear. The National Football League has always been about control. Coaches control the playbook. Owners control the future. Veterans control the culture of the locker room. Public relations departments shape the image of every team and every star. But the arrival of social media created a force no one could contain. It was not a reporter waiting at the doorway of the stadium. It was not a fan shouting from the bleachers. It was a current of information that moved too fast and reached too far for anyone to direct it. And the first players who were caught in that current paid a price they never saw coming. One running back found himself the subject of nationwide debate after a teammate filmed a harmless conversation that someone later twisted into a conspiracy. The clip showed nothing more than two men talking, but when it landed online, it became a storm. Fans speculated. Commentators invented motives. Team insiders whispered their own versions. The truth was buried under layers of interpretation until even he began to question his own memory of the moment. His career never returned to what it had been. He was never the same kind of player again. Not because he lost his physical ability, but because trust dissolved around him. He became cautious in ways that hurt him on the field. That is the kind of wound a helmet cannot protect you from. Another player saw his entire future change because a frustrated staff member recorded a short outburst during a film session. It was nothing unusual in the context of the sport. The National Football League is built on intensity. Tempers flare. Words fly. Emotions spill out. But once that clip was released online, it became a symbol for everything that critics wanted to say about him. The timing was cruel. He was entering a contract year, and he believed he had proven himself. But one 30-second video altered how executives viewed him. It cost him leverage. It cost him money. Most of all, it cost him the reputation he spent a decade trying to build. These stories are not rare. They are the new reality of a league that was once able to keep its inner world sealed off from the public. Now the walls are made of glass. Every player knows that any moment could become the next headline. A conversation, a look, K-message, a late-night mistake, a private disagreement. Any fragment of life might be taken out of context. Any sentence might be frozen in time and judged forever. What makes this era different is the sheer speed of it. There's no pause between the moment something escapes and the moment it becomes part of the national conversation. In the old world, a story could be contained long enough to gather the facts. The truth had room to breathe. But now, a rumor can outrun reality before anyone has a chance to correct it. Careers have been shaped by seconds. Reputations have been rewired by the momentum of a single viral post. I often think about the players who entered the league before social media dominated the culture and the players who entered after. The earlier generation understood privacy as a given. They believed mistakes would fade. They believed the outside world could be held at a distance. They had no reason to imagine a future where a stranger with a phone could become more influential than a coach or a general manager. The later generation has never known anything else. They grow up in a world where every message carries a risk. Every conversation might be recorded. Every locker room moment might be stored in someone else's cloud. They have learned to perform even when they are off the field because the off-field has become a stage they cannot see. What happens to a league when its secrets can no longer stay secret? What happens when a single notification can end a career faster than any hit to the helmet? What happens when the game behind the game becomes the battlefield that decides futures long before a player ever steps onto the turf? These questions sit at the heart of everything the National Football League is facing today. There is a cost to operating under constant watch, a cost that affects confidence, a cost that affects chemistry, a cost that affects the very soul of competition. The modern player must defend himself against pressures previous generations never had to confront. And the modern league must navigate a world where information moves faster than truth, and where the public often reacts before understanding the full picture. This documentary is not about the moments that played out under stadium lights. It is about the moments that unfolded in silence, the taps on a screen, the quiet messages passed between teammates, the decisions made by people who never meant to influence the fate of a franchise. This is the story of how social media reshaped what it means to be a player in the National Football League. This is the story of the league's final season of privacy and the battles that began when that season ended. There is a moment in the history of every sport when the game itself changes without anyone fully realizing it. Sometimes it is a rule. Sometimes it is a superstar who redefines what is possible. Sometimes it is a cultural shift that grows so slowly that people do not see the transformation until they look back years later. For the National Football League, that moment arrived quietly. It did not happen during a championship, was not delivered by a famous coach or a groundbreaking player. It did not appear in a stadium filled with cheering fans. It appeared in living rooms and locker rooms and team buses in the form of a glowing screen. Social media entered the National Football League without warning and then grew into the most powerful force in modern sports. What began as a simple way for fans to follow their favorite players became something much larger. The platform evolved into an ecosystem where reputations were built, damaged, defended, and destroyed in real time. The communication tools that once connected people suddenly carried enough influence to alter careers. The league discovered that it had stepped into a world where information outran strategy, where privacy dissolved, and where silence after a leak felt louder than a stadium after a touchdown. Before social media, the National Football League operated with a level of control that seems impossible today. Stories were shaped by reporters who followed unwritten rules of access. Private team matters stayed inside the building. Medical information was shared only when necessary. Internal disputes rarely escaped into the outside world. There was an understanding that not every moment needed to reach the public. Players could be emotional, frustrated, or vulnerable without fearing that someone standing nearby might record them. It was not a perfect system, but it gave the sport room to breathe. Everything changed soon after the year 2010. Smartphones became common. Every device came with a camera. Every employee at every level of an organization could silently capture a moment that was never meant to be seen. It could be a trainer, an intern, a friend of a player, a visitor, or even a family member. The floodgates opened. A team was no longer a protected space. A locker room talk could become breaking news. A quiet argument on the sideline could turn into a national discussion. A medical note left on a desk could spread across millions of screens before a team even realized it had gone missing. Some of the earliest leaks seemed harmless at first. A brief video of a coach speaking passionately. A snapshot of a player celebrating after a win. A message exchanged between teammates that was never meant for a broader audience. These fragments of life created excitement among fans who wanted every possible glimpse into the inner world of the sport. But soon, the tone shifted. Leaks became more aggressive. They carried consequences. They shaped narratives. They changed the way the league functioned. One example that still echoes through front offices involved a veteran quarterback whose private medical information appeared online long before his team wanted the public to know. The injury was minor, but the perception was not. Rival teams adjusted their game plans in anticipation of him playing at less than full strength. Media outlets built entire stories around his supposed decline. Fans speculated about his future. The player had been ready to return sooner, but the pressure created by the leak forced the coaching staff to handle the situation differently. A single leak interfered with competitive strategy and reshaped the season. Another moment that revealed the new reality came when a short clip from a locker room celebration reached social media. The clip itself showed players joking and speaking freely among one another. In the original context, it was harmless. But once removed from its environment and circulated without explanation, it became a talking point for critics who questioned the values of the team. It did not matter that the clip lacked context. It did not matter that the players were simply decompressing after a brutal game. The story had already taken on a life of its own, and the meaning was lost in the rush to react. There have been darker moments as well. Instances when a leak exposed real wrongdoing. In some cases, players were held accountable because evidence emerged that otherwise would have remained hidden. In other moments, the leaks revealed internal problems within coaching staffs or front offices. These situations showed that leaks can serve as a form of truth-telling. They reminded the world that transparency sometimes brings justice or clarity. But even in those moments of exposure, the league grappled with a deeper issue. It had lost the ability to control its internal world. It had lost the ability to determine how and when a story entered the public sphere. And once that control slipped away, it never returned. The rise of social media leaks did more than change how the public viewed players. It changed how teams negotiated contracts. A single screenshot could alter the balance of power between a player and an organization. Discussions meant to remain private suddenly became public leverage. Executives feared that any conversation might become evidence. Agents became more cautious than ever. The league discovered that even the language used in negotiations could be weaponized through exposure. Reputations shifted quickly in this environment. A player who had been respected for years could face a sudden wave of criticism based solely on a leaked message or a moment captured without consent. Coaches learned to speak differently during meetings. Team officials reconsidered who had access to sensitive information. Every person inside an organization became a potential risk. The weight of trust grew heavy. The National Football League eventually tried to regain control. It drafted confidentiality guidelines. It reminded employees of their responsibilities. It emphasized the importance of internal unity. But these measures could not compete with the sheer speed of information. A 9-second clip could reach millions before a team even realized it had left the building. There was no system strong enough to contain the digital world that surrounded the sport. The shield that once protected the league began to feel thin. This documentary exists because the battle between the National Football League and social media leaks has become one of the defining conflicts of the modern era of the sport. It is a battle fought in silence. It is a battle fought through reactions, interpretations, and consequences. It is a battle where the truth often struggles to keep pace with rumor. It is a battle that has changed players, changed coaches, changed teams, and changed the identity of the league. In the chapters ahead, I will examine the full scope of this transformation. I will explore the early era when leaks first began to challenge the old system. I will study the turning points that forced the league to confront a reality it could not escape. I will speak about the careers that changed because of a single leaked moment and the reputations rebuilt or damaged through fragments of information that traveled faster than context. I will reflect on how the league reacted, how it adapted, and how it continues to struggle with a world where information has no gatekeepers. I will discuss the emotional impact on players who learn to live with the fear that any private moment could be taken from them without warning. Most of all, I will explore what happens to a league that once thrived on secrecy when secrecy no longer exists. This is the world the modern sport lives in. A world where a phone can become more dangerous than a blitz. A world where the truth competes against speculation. A world where mistakes can outlive careers. A world where every moment carries the possibility of exposure. This is the story of how the National Football League entered an age where control slipped away and where information no longer waits for permission. I often think about how modern fans imagine leaks as a symptom of the digital age, as if secrecy only began to crumble when smartphones arrived and timelines filled with fragments of private moments. But the truth is that the NFL's relationship with leaks began long before the internet existed, long before anyone could tap a screen and release information into the world faster than a deep ball leaving a quarterback's hand. The league was born into a culture where stories traveled by word of mouth. And even in those early years, information had a way of slipping through cracks no one wanted to acknowledge. It happened in whispers between reporters and stadium workers, in quiet hallway conversations after games, and in the subtle exchanges that shaped reputations without anyone knowing who the original source had been. In the earliest decades of the NFL, the idea of privacy was already fragile. Teams were small, locker rooms were cramped, and almost every staff member knew every player's habits, weaknesses, or emotional breaking points. Newspapers operated with a hunger for controversy, even if they worked within an unspoken pact that some stories were too explosive to print. But inside the old stadiums, where concrete walls echoed every word, leaks still slipped into circulation. Reporters learned which players were battling undisclosed injuries because they noticed a limp in a hallway or overheard a trainer mentioning swelling during a quiet night after a game. Coaches whispered frustrations to confidants, who later repeated them to columnists. Owners quietly shifted blame for poor seasons, and those thoughts found their way into Sunday morning print. It was a slower process, but the effect was recognizable. A leaked story could shape a player's perception long before television ever aired it. There were moments when these early leaks changed careers in ways the league never publicly admitted. When a player was quietly labeled uncoachable by an assistant coach who vented to a friendly reporter, that story lived longer than any highlight reel. When a star running back was rumored to be difficult in the locker room, it affected contract negotiations before anyone had a chance to defend themselves. These stories traveled through sports sections, often written in careful language that hinted at issues without explicitly naming them. But readers knew how to read between the lines. And the league understood that once a narrative escaped into public view, it could not be pulled back. The damage was done in print, ink soaked into paper that millions consumed before breakfast. In those days, leaks often came from people who believed they were shaping the truth rather than distorting it. Equipment managers talked freely to local reporters because they felt loyal to the team. community and believed transparency was part of the sport's identity. Trainers carried the weight of knowing far more than they were allowed to say, and some could not resist sharing a detail when asked the right question. Even owners occasionally fed information to newspapers when they wanted to shift pressure away from themselves. It was not done with malice. It was simply how information flowed in a time when boundaries were shaped more by relationships than by rules. The league did not have a massive communications structure in those early days. There were no departments dedicated to crisis management or protecting sensitive information. Teams had public relations representatives, but their influence was limited. They could not prevent a story from surfacing if a reporter had already heard it from someone trusted. The NFL was still young enough that it relied heavily on goodwill, and goodwill did not stop people from talking. Even then, the league understood that the narrative surrounding players mattered almost as much as their performance on the field. But it lacked the tools to control that narrative. As the league grew in the 1960s and 1970s, leaks began to evolve. The media landscape expanded. Television brought cameras closer to the field, and reporters gained greater access to sidelines, locker rooms, and team facilities. Although social media did not exist, the appetite for inside information grew faster than the league could contain it. A player caught arguing with a coach during a heated moment might find the story magnified by journalists who witnessed it. If a team doctor whispered that a quarterback's injury was more serious than the club admitted. That information found its way into broadcasts. Leaks were no longer limited to newspapers. They appeared in radio segments, in televised commentary, and in the growing circle of sports insiders who made careers by knowing what others did not. Locker rooms were supposed to be sanctuaries. For many players, that was the one place where they could let emotions spill without worrying about cameras or microphones. But even then, leaks infiltrated those walls. A frustrated player throwing equipment after a loss might find the story retold in Monday morning columns. A rookie who broke curfew the night before a game could become the subject of a whispered report that shaped how coaches viewed him. The league tried to impose rules restricting media access, but information still spread. Human nature made it impossible to fully contain. There were high-profile incidents even before the digital age that exposed how vulnerable the league was. In the late 1970s and 1980s, stories about substance use, internal conflicts, and contract disputes surfaced through sources the league never identified publicly. Reporters often cited anonymous team insiders, a phrase that became synonymous with someone leaking something they were not supposed to reveal. Fans hung on every detail, interpreting leaks as windows into a secret world they rarely glimpsed. The league recognized that controlling information had become part of its identity, but controlling people was much harder. The more voices involved in a team's daily operations, the more risk existed that one would speak when silence was expected. The earliest leaks did not spread as fast as they do today, but their impact was no less powerful. Careers changed because of rumors that grew legs and ran further than the truth ever could. A single printed story could tilt public perception for an entire season. Coaches lost trust in players when they suspected someone had shared internal disagreements. Teammates questioned one another's loyalty. Owners pressured staff to find the source of a story, but the truth was that leaks could come from nearly anyone who moved through the building. Looking back, I see that era as the foundation of something the league never fully addressed. It treated leaks as minor annoyances rather than structural weaknesses. It never built the systems needed to protect private conversations, sensitive information, or moments of vulnerability. Instead, it accepted leaks as part of the ecosystem of professional sports. Reporters needed stories. Teams needed attention. Players needed coverage. The relationships were tangled, and leaks moved through those tangles effortlessly. The league never imagined a world where information could escape in seconds rather than days. It believed time was its ally. It believed context could be managed. It believed reputations could be repaired through controlled statements and limited access. What the NFL did not realize was that the first era of leaks was only the beginning. It was a preview of a future where control would become nearly impossible, where narratives would break loose before teams could form a plan, and where the smallest moment of carelessness could shape a player's legacy permanently. The early leaks taught the league that information had power, but it did not teach the league how to harness that power. Instead, the NFL continued to operate with a belief that the walls around it were stronger than they truly were. As I look back on that time, before the digital world transformed everything, I recognized the patterns that would later repeat with far greater intensity. Leaks traveled slowly, but they traveled with purpose. They revealed tension between truth and image. They exposed vulnerabilities in a league that prided itself on unity and discipline. And they hinted at a future where the battle for information would become as fierce as anything that happened on the field. The first era of leaks was quiet, often subtle, and frequently overlooked. But it was the beginning of the NFL's long struggle to protect its stories, its people, and its carefully crafted identity. The league did not know it then, but that struggle would only intensify. It would grow until secrecy became a fragile illusion, and the truth would be shaped not by who spoke first, but by who recorded it. There was a moment in the league when everything quietly shifted, even if no one recognized it at the time. It did not happen during a major scandal or a high-profile controversy. It happened the moment players began walking into locker rooms with phones that were no longer just devices for calling home or checking messages. There were cameras, recorders, and broadcasting tools all at once. The early versions were simple, but the iPhone changed the landscape with a speed that the league could not counter. When that technology entered the NFL, it felt at first like a convenience. Players could check emails, scroll through music playlists, stay connected with family, and capture memories with teammates. But beneath the surface, a new era was beginning. An era where privacy would slowly dissolve and where no moment would ever feel fully protected again. The arrival of the smartphone created a world where every single person became a potential documentarian. Every player, coach, trainer, and equipment assistant carried a device that could instantly capture video and send it across the world with a single tap. The early years of this transition were characterized by a kind of innocence. People still trusted that locker rooms were sacred spaces, and they assumed that no one would violate that unspoken bond. But trust erodes quickly when technology evolves faster than culture. Phones were increasingly present during team meetings, in weight rooms, in training facilities, and on charter flights. What once required a television crew now required nothing more than a steady hand and the chance to avoid being noticed. The league realized that something fundamental had changed when the first locker room videos began surfacing online. These were not official recordings. They were moments that were never supposed to leave the building. A team celebration after a big win. A frustrated player venting after a loss. A coach giving an intense post-game speech. Moments that, in the past, would have been remembered only by the people inside the room. Suddenly, they were circulating through social media, gaining thousands of views within hours. The league issued warnings and reminders about respecting privacy, but the culture was moving faster than the league's policies. A single phone in the wrong hands at the wrong time could undo years of controlled messaging. The shock of the smartphone era did not come from malicious intent. It came from the simple reality that everyone had a camera in their pocket and no clear sense of where the boundaries were. Players recorded themselves celebrating with teammates, thinking the video would be shared only among friends. Instead, clips made their way to public pages. And from there, two news outlets hungry for stories that revealed the human side of the league. Teams scrambled to respond. Public relations departments tried to control the narrative, but once a video reached the internet, control was no longer possible. It spread too fast, too unpredictably, and with too many interpretations attached. One of the earliest examples of the smartphone's impact came from sideline footage captured by players who never intended to create controversy. A simple recording of a coach scolding a player or a tense argument between teammates could take on a life of its own once shared online. Without context, fans interpreted these clips as signs of dysfunction. Analysts debated the meaning of every word. And talk shows built segments around fragments of conversations that were never meant to be public. The league struggled to address these situations because the traditional rules no longer applied. It was not a reporter breaking a story. It was a player unknowingly broadcasting a moment that should have stayed behind closed doors. The smartphone also changed the nature of trust within teams. Players began to feel the weight of being watched, not just by cameras on the field, but by the phones in the hands of the people around them. A private expression of frustration could become a headline. A personal moment shared with teammates could be leaked and dissected by millions. The emotional cost of this new reality was heavy. Veterans who had spent years in the league before the smartphone era often described a sense of loss. They remembered when locker rooms were protected spaces, insulated from the outside world, where people could speak honestly without fear of their words being recorded. The new generation grew up in a world where privacy was already fragile, and they adapted more easily, but they still felt the weight of constant exposure. Teams attempted to enforce rules banning phones during meetings and practices, but enforcement was inconsistent. Even during moments when phones were prohibited, the mere presence of technology created suspicion. The belief that anything could be recorded changed how people behaved. The league found itself facing the reality that its internal culture had to evolve in response to a world where every individual could become a broadcaster. The smartphone revolution also created new avenues for leaks that the league had never imagined. A medical scan left visible on a screen for a moment could be captured and shared. A playbook page glimpsed in the background of a selfie could reveal strategic information. An offhand conversation during a team flight could be uploaded before anyone realized what had happened. Every inch of space became vulnerable. Every moment carried risk. The speed at which information traveled meant that a leak could spread internationally before the league could even confirm its authenticity. In the early years of this transition, the NFL underestimated the cultural shift. It issued memos, encouraged caution, and trusted that players would respect boundaries. But the shift was not about malicious intent. It was about the spontaneous nature of sharing, the thrill of capturing a moment, and the instinct to broadcast life as it happened. The league suddenly found itself forced to rethink how it protected information. It had to create policies that accounted for a reality where players were both athletes and content creators. It had to acknowledge that the relationship between teams and the public had fundamentally changed. The smartphone also blurred the line between personal and professional identities. Players used social media to build their own brands, connect with fans, and share their perspectives. This empowered them in ways that were long overdue, but it also created new tensions. A player posting a behind-the-scenes moment could unintentionally reveal sensitive information. A harmless video recorded in a locker room could expose private discussions. The league wanted players to engage with fans, yet feared the uncontrolled nature of what could be shared. As the iPhone evolved and cameras improved, the stakes grew. High-quality video captured moments that felt intimate, raw, and unfiltered. These were the kinds of moments that networks paid millions to capture, yet they now surfaced online with no warning and no context. Fans loved the authenticity. Executives feared the consequences. Coaches felt the loss of control. Teams updated their internal rules, but technology outpaced every attempt to catch up. Looking back, it is clear that the smartphone did not just change how information spread. It changed the psychology of the entire league. Players began to monitor their own behavior with a new kind of caution. Coaches became more guarded in their speeches. Staff members became hesitant to speak freely. The presence of a device capable of recording everything created pressure that was often invisible but always present. The league had entered a new era where secrecy could be undone by a tap of a screen. This shift marked the beginning of the NFL's battle with a force it could not regulate. The smartphone became the most powerful tool in modern sports, and every person who carried one became a potential gatekeeper of stories that once stayed hidden. No meeting room felt fully secure. No celebration felt completely private. And no mistake felt small enough to remain unseen. The NFL had survived the first era of leaks because information traveled slowly. But once smartphones entered the building, leaks became instantaneous. They required no source, no reporter, no newspaper. They required only a moment of impulse. And once that impulse took hold, the league realized that it was facing a challenge far greater than anything it had encountered before. There was a time when players believed that the locker room was the final sanctuary in a sport built on exposure. The field was public, the press conferences were public, and the stadiums amplified every mistake for the world to see. But the locker room was different. It was the one place where men could be unfiltered and unarmored, where emotions did not need to be managed for cameras or fans. It was where painful conversations unfolded, where tempers rose and fell, where teammates held one another accountable, and where leaders shaped the soul of a season. The locker room was the core of an NFL team's identity, protected by an unwritten agreement that whatever happened inside those walls stayed inside. That belief held strong for decades, until one phone in the wrong moment broke the silence and proved that nothing was sacred anymore. The first major locker room leak that shook the league did not come from a disgruntled player or a vindictive staff member. It came from excitement. A player recorded a post-game celebration after a crucial win, capturing teammates shouting, laughing, and reveling in a rare moment of unity that only athletes understand. The video felt harmless at first, a personal keepsake meant to commemorate a high point in a long season. But it made its way onto social media, and within minutes, journalists dissected every background detail, every overheard phrase, and every expression on every face. What felt to players like a private moment instantly became a national story. The celebration was spun into a narrative about arrogance, bulletin board material, disrespect, and lack of professionalism. What the players saw as joy, the outside world reframed as controversy. The shock inside that locker room was not anger. It was betrayal. Teammates who had always felt free to let their emotions unfold behind closed doors suddenly felt exposed. Veteran players who had built their careers on trust and camaraderie sensed the ground shifting. Younger players who grew up in a world where sharing was second nature began to realize the weight of their devices. A space that once felt untouchable no longer felt safe. The most emotionally charged impacts came from leaked speeches. Coaches prepare their locker room messages with more intensity than many people realize. These speeches are raw, emotional, and deeply personal. They are crafted not for public consumption, but for the hearts and minds of the men who carry the weight of a season. When one of these speeches leaked, the league witnessed the kind of vulnerability that rarely reaches the public. A coach who normally projected strength was suddenly shown in a state of emotional exhaustion, pleading with his team to believe in themselves. Instead of inspiring admiration, social media turned the moment into a spectacle. Pundits questioned his leadership. Comment sections mocked his tone. Analysts debated his future. A moment meant to strengthen a team was repurposed as entertainment. Players who watched that leak unfold began to understand how fragile their trust had become. The locker room was supposed to be the one place where they could express fear, anger, disappointment, or hope without worrying that someone would capture it. When those speeches surfaced online, it felt like an intrusion into the emotional core of the sport. It was not the words themselves that hurt players. It was the invasion of a place where they believed they could finally breathe without being judged. One of the most damaging locker room leaks involved a frustrated player venting after a loss. He threw his helmet, shouted at teammates, and made comments that were harsh but honest in the heat of the moment. A nearby player recorded the scene without malicious intent, thinking the clip represented passion and commitment. When the video reached the public, the context faded. Analysts labeled the player toxic. Fans called him a problem in the locker room. Contract negotiations shifted. Endorsement conversations cooled. The player later admitted that the moment felt like someone had opened a door he never intended anyone outside the team to walk through. It was a private expression of frustration transformed into a narrative about character. The reason these leaks shook players more deeply than any on-field scandal came down to the nature of the space itself. The locker room is where athletes prepare to face the world, but also where they recover from what the world does to them. It is where rookies cry after their first tough loss, where veterans tape themselves together for another week, and where teammates share their personal battles away from the chaos of public life. These moments are not meant for fans or media. They are meant for the people who understand the sacrifices required to play a violent and unforgiving game. When a locker room leak exposes the inner world of a team, it does more than reveal words or actions. It reveals private pain, private joy, private leadership, and private conflict. It reveals the unpolished truth behind the polished image the league works so hard to maintain. That truth is powerful, and once it is released, it cannot be contained. Players began to feel pressure in ways they had never experienced. They weighed every sentence they spoke in the locker room, wondering if their words might surface online. They hesitated before celebrating too loudly or expressing frustration too openly. The natural emotional flow of a team became strained. Some players started checking the phone usage of people around them. Others asked teammates to keep their devices in lockers. Coaches gave speeches with a different tone, carefully choosing words that could withstand public interpretation. Teams responded by attempting to tighten rules. They restricted phone usage, created penalties for unauthorized recordings, milisays that required players to leave devices behind during critical moments. But rules could not undo the underlying sense of vulnerability. The trust that once defined locker room culture had been permanently altered. The league also confronted a deeper issue. The locker room had been the foundation of its mythology. It symbolized unity, resilience, and brotherhood. It was the heart of countless narratives about teamwork and sacrifice. When leaks exposed the raw truth of this space, the myth cracked. Fans who watched leaked clips began to realize how turbulent team dynamics could be. They heard arguments that were never meant to leave the walls. They saw tension that was normally smoothed over by official statements. They witnessed the true emotional cost of the sport. For some players, this exposure felt like a violation of their humanity. They wanted the public to see the beauty of football, but not the pain behind it. They wanted fans to feel the intensity of the sport, but not the private moments that required trust to unfold. The locker room had always been the one environment where players could let the world fade for a moment, and now even that refuge felt uncertain. Yet the most revealing aspect of locker room leaks was not what they showed, but what they created. They created a fracture within teams, forcing conversations about loyalty, privacy, accountability, and the weight of technology. They created dilemmas about where boundaries should be drawn and who should protect them. And they created a new reality in which the league had to acknowledge that the modern athlete lives in a world of constant exposure. Locker room leaks did not destroy the NFL, but they did compromise its most sacred space. They taught players that privacy was no longer guaranteed. They taught coaches that their words could become national headlines. They taught organizations that trust was no longer a simple expectation, but something that required vigilance. The locker room had been the final stronghold of authenticity in a sport shaped by cameras and narratives. When that stronghold cracked, the league entered a new era where nothing could ever be fully contained again. There are moments in a player's career that feel heavier than any hit they have ever taken. These moments rarely happen under stadium lights or in front of roaring crowds. They happen in quiet medical rooms, where the truth of a body under strain is written in scans, diagnoses, and whispered conversations between doctors. The medical records of an NFL player hold the most vulnerable truth of all. They reveal the miles on a player's joints, The hidden injuries they fight through, the concussions they deny, the lingering pains they refuse to acknowledge publicly. For decades, these records were protected by a small circle of professionals who treated them with the confidentiality they deserved. But when leaks began to invade even the medical side of the sport, players understood that their last layer of protection was beginning to erode. The league entered a new kind of crisis when medical information started circulating online. Unlike locker room leaks, which exposed emotions, or sideline recordings, which revealed conflict, leaked medical reports exposed the private details of a player's health in ways that reshaped careers overnight. A diagnosis intended for team doctors and trainers could suddenly appear on social media, interpreted by hundreds of thousands of people with no medical expertise. A concussion evaluation meant to safeguard a player could be turned into a weapon in negotiations or a spark for controversy. What once remained in secure files began showing up in news alerts, fan forums, and anonymous accounts that claimed insider access. The first wave of medical leaks arrived quietly. A player preparing for a contract extension found his MRI results spreading online. The report detailed inflammation in a joint that had never been publicly disclosed. Analysts debated whether he was worth the money he was asking for. Fans questioned his durability. Teams interested in signing him suddenly hesitated. He later admitted that he felt stripped of his dignity, as if someone had taken the most private truth about his body and put it on display without consent. The leak did not just harm his bargaining position. It changed how fans judged his toughness and how coaches evaluated his future. It turned a medical condition into a headline. The emotional toll of this new reality was impossible to ignore. Players who had spent their careers fighting through pain now feared that any detail, no matter how small, could be exposed. A slight ankle sprain recorded during treatment could turn into rumors of a significant injury. A routine medical check could be twisted into speculation about long-term health issues. The line between fact and interpretation became blurred, and players found themselves trapped in a narrative they did not create. A medical report that should have been a private discussion between athlete and doctor became a subject for debate among strangers. The concussion era intensified the stakes even further. As the league faced scrutiny for its handling of head injuries, players grew more protective of their evaluations. They feared being labeled reckless if they returned too quickly, or being labeled weak if they took too long to recover. When concussion reports leaked, they often lacked context. Social media turned symptoms into judgments and recovery timelines into accusations. A player who failed a baseline test could be mocked. A player who insisted he was fine could be criticized for risking his long-term health. The league had spent years building protocols to protect players, but leaks undermined those efforts by exposing sensitive data to audiences who had no understanding of the complexities involved. The most troubling aspect of medical leaks was the sense of betrayal they created. Players trusted team doctors and trainers with information they told no one else. They revealed symptoms they hid from their families. They admitted to pain they had ignored for seasons. When any of this information surfaced online, they began to question who they could trust. Was it an internal staff member? Was it someone who overheard a conversation? Was it a digital breach? The uncertainty fractured relationships inside organizations. Some players demanded to know who had access to their files. Others became guarded, refusing to disclose symptoms out of fear they would be exposed. The league suddenly faced not only a privacy issue, but a safety issue, as players hid injuries to protect themselves from public scrutiny. The financial repercussions were equally significant. A leaked medical report could derail contract negotiations. A player entering free agency could lose millions in potential offers if teams believed he carried hidden injury risks. A player competing for a roster spot could be released if a leak suggested he was not physically dependable. For a league where careers are short and opportunities are fragile, medical leaks became a threat that could change the trajectory of a player's livelihood in an instant. Agents began demanding stricter protections. Unions raised concerns. Players saw their health information being treated like currency, traded and interpreted without regard for their lives beyond the field. The backdrop of the digital age made everything more volatile. Information spread before accuracy could be confirmed. Rumors began to feel as powerful as facts. A screenshot shared anonymously could ignite days of chaos. Even when leaks were proven false, the damage lingered. Fans remembered the rumors more vividly than the corrections. Analysts referenced leaks long after they had been disproven. Once a narrative about a player's health gained traction, it became nearly impossible to fully erase. There were moments when leaked medical reports exposed more than injuries. They revealed the emotional strain of the sport in ways people rarely saw. One leak showed a player being evaluated for anxiety and exhaustion. Instead of empathy, he faced public scrutiny and speculative debates about his mental toughness. Another leak revealed a player undergoing treatment for chronic pain long after he had retired. Fans had never realized how much his body had endured. The leak sparked discussions about post-career health, but it also violated a boundary that should never have been crossed. Private suffering was turned into content. These moments forced the league to confront a harsh truth. Medical privacy is not just about protecting information. It is about protecting dignity. It is about allowing players to confront their vulnerabilities without fearing exposure. It is about respecting the human cost of a brutal sport. When leaks chipped away at that protection, the league faced an erosion of trust that threatened the foundation of player welfare. Teams responded with new protocols, tighter access, encrypted systems, and strict penalties. But policies could not restore trust that had already been broken. Players continued to fear that their most personal information could become a headline. The relationship between athlete and medical staff, once built on honesty and reliance, became strained. Some players consulted private doctors to avoid internal documentation. Others refused treatment until absolutely necessary. The unintended consequence of leaks was a culture where secrecy became a survival strategy. The league also faced a deeper existential question. Football is a sport built on controlled narratives. Teams carefully curate injury reports, revealing only what is required while protecting players from unnecessary scrutiny. Social media shattered that structure. A single leak could expose details that undermined team strategy, affected betting markets, or revealed weakness to opponents. The NFL could no longer rely on carefully crafted public injury updates when detailed medical reports circulated independently. The balance of information, once controlled tightly by organizations, tilted toward a chaotic and unpredictable public arena. The psychological toll of these leaks became as heavy as the physical toll of the injuries themselves. Players wondered how much the outside world deserved to know about their bodies. They questioned whether the league could protect them from exposure. They asked themselves whether vulnerability was possible in a sport that demanded constant strength. Medical leaks struck at the heart of the NFL because they pierced the most private layer of the athlete experience. They revealed truths that should have belonged only to the player. They turned health into spectacle, pain into content, and confidentiality into uncertainty. In doing so, they reshaped the relationship between the league and the men who risk everything to play the game. The process of negotiating a contract in the NFL has always been high stakes. A single number can determine the trajectory of a player's career, the future of a team's season, and the balance of power in a locker room. For decades, negotiations were conducted in controlled settings, offices, private meetings, and phone calls carefully orchestrated between agents, general managers, and owners. Confidentiality was paramount. Deals could be leaked, yes, but the pathways were limited. The advent of social media, smartphones, and instant messaging changed all of that, turning negotiations from carefully guarded discussions into high-risk public spectacles where a single screenshot could redefine the terms and the narrative. It started quietly. A player eager to share progress with a family member or a friend would forward a text message or a contract proposal to someone outside the negotiation circle. That message, intended to remain private, could be screenshotted, sent to social media, or even posted anonymously on a forum. Within hours, the private deliberations of agents, coaches, and team executives could be dissected by millions of fans, sports analysts, and rival organizations. A single line about compensation or incentives could dominate headlines, creating pressure from the public that had nothing to do with the negotiation itself. Suddenly, deals were no longer between the parties involved. They became a spectacle, and every misstep, every leak, was amplified. The implications of these leaks were immediate and profound. A text that revealed frustration over a proposed salary could be interpreted as arrogance or inflexibility. A screenshot showing a player asking for guaranteed money could provoke debates about entitlement. Analysts and fans would weigh in on a deal that neither side had finalized. Negotiators found themselves reacting to narratives rather than focusing on strategy. The public could no longer separate rumor from reality, and in many cases, the pressure forced concessions or changes that had little to do with the merits of the contract itself. What once required patience, discretion, and careful timing now demanded speed, damage control, and media management at every step. The first high-profile incident that brought this issue into the spotlight involved a veteran quarterback negotiating a multi-year extension. During the process, a private text exchange between him and his agent leaked to social media. The text revealed frustration with the proposed guarantees and expressed doubt about remaining with the team long-term. Overnight, what had been a private negotiation became a national story. Fans debated loyalty, sports talk shows speculated about a trade, and the team's front office felt the heat from both public opinion and internal pressure. The player later admitted that he had never anticipated a casual message could ripple outward with such force, changing the tenor of the entire negotiation before a single pen was put to paper. Leaked agent communications were equally disruptive. Agents tasked with advocating for their clients often exchanged candid opinions about offers, market value, or leverage. When these messages became public, they revealed the inner workings of the bargaining process and exposed strategies that were meant to remain confidential. Teams discovered they could no longer negotiate in a vacuum, knowing that any comment could be interpreted as posturing, aggression, or vulnerability. Players, too, felt the impact, realizing that their private relationships with agents could be scrutinized, misrepresented, or weaponized against them. Disagreements within negotiations became more fragile under the scrutiny of potential leaks. What was once a normal debate over contract terms could be transformed into a public narrative about discord. Coaches, teammates, and owners could be drawn into speculation about a player's character or commitment. In extreme cases, leaks forced a team's hand, compelling them to offer more favorable terms simply to quiet public discussion or to protect a reputation. The negotiation room, once insulated from outside pressures, now existed under the constant shadow of viral exposure. The psychological toll on players and agents was significant. Every word, every tone, and every message had to be considered not only for its impact on the negotiation, but also for how it could be interpreted if leaked. A casual phrase about dissatisfaction could become a headline. A joking remark could be seen as a sign of rebellion. The fear of leaks created a hypervigilant environment where the pressure to communicate carefully extended beyond the professional into the personal. Players began to internalize the stakes, second-guessing not only their words, but also their emotions and their ability to express frustration without creating consequences. The rise of screenshots and leaked messages forced the league to reconsider its approach to communication. Teams implemented stricter protocols regarding the use of personal devices during negotiation periods. Agents were warned about the risks of forwarding messages. Legal teams developed guidelines for documenting conversations in ways that could protect confidentiality while still advancing a deal. Yet the reality remained. Once a message escaped, control was lost. Unlike the controlled leaks of earlier decades, where reporters filtered the story through narrative understanding, a screenshot posted online carried no context. It existed in a vacuum, and the interpretation could be harsh, unrelenting, and permanent. There were also cultural consequences. The public began to expect transparency at levels that were impossible to deliver. Fans wanted instant insight into contract negotiations, salaries, and disputes. Leaks fed this demand, and the cycle accelerated. Players were caught between two worlds: the need to negotiate privately for strategic and financial reasons, and the reality that every interaction could be made public. The tension created pressure that often affected relationships within teams, with owners questioning loyalty and with fans judging motives that were never intended for public evaluation. A particularly illustrative case involved a rising star wide receiver during a free agency period. A private discussion with a prospective team leaked online, showing the player's agent negotiating aggressively for signing bonuses and guaranteed money. The leak sparked a media frenzy. Analysts debated the player's priorities. Fans speculated about his character. Competing teams interpreted the leak as leverage, reshaping their approach to negotiations. What should have been a tactical discussion became a national spectacle. In the end, the player received a contract similar to what he sought, but the emotional cost was lasting. He later remarked that the process felt like a performance under constant surveillance, where trust had to be rationed and spontaneity was impossible. The shift from boardrooms to viral screenshots did not only impact the players, it affected team executives, coaches, and support staff. Front offices had to prepare for the possibility that every internal communication could become public. Negotiation strategies were adjusted, not just for financial efficiency, but also for narrative management. Lawyers and PR teams became integral to every step of a contract discussion, and yet even the most careful planning could not prevent the instantaneous nature of a digital leak. The era had arrived where negotiation was no longer a closed-door conversation, but a high-stakes drama unfolding in real time before a global audience. Ultimately, the rise of leaked texts and messages transformed the psychology of contracts in the negotiations ceased to be solely about money and performance. It became a negotiation over perception, over reputation, over control in a world where every detail could be amplified. Players learned to guard not only their words, but also their devices, their impulses, and their trust. Agents learned to anticipate leaks and plan around them. Teams learned that no wall was truly impenetrable. In the age of screenshots, a single mistake could redefine a career, alter public opinion, and shift the balance of power in ways that were impossible to predict. Leaked communications revealed more than the terms of deals. They revealed the vulnerability of a league struggling to maintain control in an age where information moved faster than authority. Negotiations had become theater, a performance shaped as much by audience reaction as by contractual terms. And in this new environment, every player, every agent, and every executive realized that the game had changed forever. What was once private, strategic, and controlled now existed under the constant threat of exposure. And the cost of that exposure could be measured not just in money, but in reputation, relationships, and trust. There is a unique intensity to a sideline during an NFL game. The stadium may roar with thousands of voices, but in that moment, everything feels suspended. Coaches scream, players shout, and emotions run raw, filtered only by the immediacy of the game. For decades, these moments were private in the sense that only a few thousand fans, and the cameras broadcasting to homes, could witness them. What was said on the sidelines, the tension between coaches and players, the frustrations vented in the heat of a game, was considered ephemeral. It existed in real time and disappeared once the final whistle blew. Until smartphones and social media transformed these raw emotional bursts into permanent public records, they remained unrecorded truths. The first notable sideline leak that captured national attention involved a star running back during a pivotal playoff game. Frustrated by an ongoing series of missed assignments, he shouted at his offensive line, gesturing with both urgency and anger. A teammate, capturing what was meant to be an informal recording for personal reflection, posted it to social media. Within minutes, the clip circulated widely. Analysts dissected his tone, interpreted his gestures as insubordination, and questioned his leadership. The player's frustration, entirely legitimate in the context of the game, became a defining narrative of his professionalism. Overnight, a raw moment of emotion evolved into a story about character, leadership, and locker room dynamics. What made these sideline leaks particularly potent was their authenticity. Unlike press conferences or post-game interviews, these were not curated. They were unfiltered, unscripted, and emotionally charged. Fans and media consumed them as truth, often without context or understanding of the underlying circumstances. A player arguing with a coach over a missed assignment, a defensive lineman shouting after a blown coverage, or a quarterback voicing frustration at a miscommunication were now subject to national scrutiny. Every shout, every gesture, every emotional response could be turned into a headline. The psychological impact on players was profound. Sideline outbursts are a natural part of competitive football. They are moments where the intensity of the game overwhelms reason, where passion meets fatigue, and where the stakes of victory or loss weigh heavily. When these moments went public, players began to self-censor, monitoring their reactions to avoid potential viral clips. Some avoided confrontation entirely, holding back emotions that would have otherwise helped motivate a team. The natural expression of frustration or urgency, previously a tool for leadership and communication, became a calculated risk. Coaches, too, were affected. Sidelines are spaces where authority, strategy, and emotion intersect. A coach yelling instructions, correcting mistakes, or venting frustration has always been part of the game's rhythm. But once sideline footage began circulating, every raised voice could be interpreted as instability, every gesture as unprofessionalism. Coaches became cautious, tempering their expressions and tone, knowing that a viral clip could overshadow the outcome of a game. The game itself was no longer the sole measure of performance. Public perception began to play an equal, if not greater, role. Leaked sideline footage also shaped media narratives in unprecedented ways. Analysts could now dissect interactions frame by frame, drawing conclusions from split-second gestures or a single word. Clips of a player arguing with a coach could be replayed endlessly, interpreted as signs of dissent or lack of discipline. Fans consumed these snippets eagerly, creating speculation, memes, and discussion threads that amplified the emotional resonance of a single moment. In many cases, the clip became the story itself, eclipsing the actual game, performance, or strategy. One particularly significant incident involved a wide receiver who, frustrated by repeated coverage mistakes, shouted in a way that expressed both urgency and impatience. The video, originally shared among teammates, found its way to social media. Sports outlets quickly picked up the clip, framing it as evidence of a fractured locker room. Analysts debated the player's commitment, leadership, and character, while fans speculated about the stability of the team. What had been a short, intense expression of competitive emotion became a defining moment of public judgment. The spread of these clips also altered team dynamics. Players became wary of being filmed. Coaches second-guessed their own reactions, and trust within teams became fragile. A single misstep on the sidelines could shift public opinion, affecting both personal reputation and team cohesion. The natural flow of communication, essential to in-game adjustments and leadership, was constrained by the constant awareness that any moment could be captured and shared. Sideline outbursts that went public revealed an uncomfortable truth. The modern NFL exists in two overlapping worlds. One is the world of the game itself, played under immense physical and emotional pressure. The other is the world of public perception, amplified by social media, where every gesture can be analyzed, criticized, or celebrated outside of context. For players and coaches, the boundary between these worlds began to blur. moments meant for immediate tactical expression now carried lasting consequences. The unintended consequences of these leaks extended beyond immediate public scrutiny. Agents began to use viral clips as leverage or as cautionary examples. Teams considered potential reputational risks during contract negotiations. Sponsorship deals and endorsements were affected by perceived temperament issues, even when based solely on short, out-of-context sideline recordings. The emotional stakes of performance were now entwined with digital exposure, transforming what was once a private, intense exchange into a factor influencing long-term career prospects. Moreover, these leaked moments exposed the human side of the game in ways fans had never fully appreciated. Frustration, anger, and urgency are integral to performance at the highest level. Sideline outbursts revealed the immense psychological and emotional pressures players endure. While the public often judged these moments harshly, they also highlighted the cost of competition, the intensity of preparation, and the weight of expectation that comes with professional football. Unfortunately, the leak of these moments rarely came with the context necessary for empathy or understanding, leaving players exposed to misinterpretation. The era of sideline leaks marked another evolution in the NFL's struggle to manage information. Players, coaches, and teams realized that the field was no longer the only battleground. The digital arena of social media had become equally important. The lesson was clear. Raw emotional moments were no longer private. Every action, word, or gesture carried the potential to define public perception. Athletes could no longer rely solely on performance to shape their reputation. Their private expressions of emotion now carried as much weight in the court of public opinion as any touchdown or interception. The cumulative effect was profound. Sideline outbursts, once ephemeral and fleeting, became permanent. They shaped narratives, influenced contracts, affected team cohesion, and altered how players approached the emotional demands of the game. The NFL, long accustomed to managing public perception through controlled press statements and curated highlights, was forced to confront a world where the most intense human emotions could no longer be contained. As this era unfolded, players began to adapt. Some trained themselves to maintain composure in front of cameras and teammates. Others adjusted their interactions with coaching staff. The league responded with reminders, social media guidelines, and disciplinary measures. But no policy could fully restore the natural authenticity of the sideline. What remained was a tension between the intensity necessary for competition and the permanence of digital scrutiny, a balance that would define player behavior for years to come. Sideline outbursts that went public were more than just clips or viral moments. They represented the collision of raw human emotion with an age of instantaneous documentation. They exposed vulnerabilities, reshaped narratives, and redefined the emotional architecture of the league. The NFL had entered a world in which every word shouted in passion carried potential consequences far beyond the moment. Itself, a world where the field and the feed had become inseparable in their impact on the game and the men who played it. Every team in the NFL operates as a finely tuned machine, with layers of personnel working behind the scenes to keep the organization running smoothly. Coaches, players, and front office staff occupy the most visible roles, but there is a vast network of employees whose work is critical, yet largely unseen. Equipment managers prepare gear, trainers monitor player health, video assistants catalog practice footage, interns handle communications, and administrative staff coordinate logistics. For decades, these employees were trusted implicitly. They were part of the inner workings of a team, invisible cogs in a larger operation, bound by loyalty, confidentiality, and the implicit understanding that what happens inside the organization stays there. That understanding, however, began to erode with the rise of digital connectivity. The very people tasked with maintaining the team's infrastructure became a potential source of exposure. The first whispers of internal leaks were subtle. An equipment manager might share an offhand comment about a player's injury with a friend. An intern could post a seemingly innocent picture of a practice facility or sideline bench that revealed more than intended. Alone, these acts seemed trivial. Together, they signaled a vulnerability the league had never faced before. The people responsible for maintaining trust and security had access to information that, in the wrong hands, could create headlines, scandals, or even financial consequences. One of the earliest high-profile incidents involved a video assistant who recorded practice footage meant solely for internal analysis. The video contained snippets of strategic formations, audibles, and player tendencies designed for team review. Before anyone realized what had happened, the video was circulating online. Competing teams, media analysts, and fans dissected every frame. The league compromised team strategy and highlighted an unsettling truth. The people closest to the operational pulse of a franchise could inadvertently or intentionally become the source of the biggest vulnerabilities. Employees occupy a paradoxical position. They are essential to a team's success, yet often remain unnoticed, creating a false sense of security. Teams assumed loyalty, but loyalty alone could no longer be counted on as a safeguard. The digital era had made the smallest misstep potentially catastrophic. A personal phone, a social media post, or a casual conversation could result in exposure of information that had previously been unthinkable to leave the organization's walls. Every player, coach, and executive suddenly faced a new kind of risk that came not from the opposition, not from rivals in the media, but from within their own ranks. The impact of internal leaks extended beyond operational disruption. They challenged the psychological contract between players and organizations. Players trusted staff with private moments, medical treatments, emotional conversations, personal milestones, and moments of frustration. When employees leaked information, whether intentionally or through negligence, that trust was shattered. Athletes began to view every interaction with caution, second-guessing who could be trusted with even the most mundane detail. The locker room, sideline, and private meetings all became permeable in ways they had never been before. Interns, in particular, became a focal point of concern. Their access to communications, media accounts, and digital infrastructure created opportunities for leaks. Some interns, eager to prove themselves or build a social media presence, would post images or stories they believed were harmless, but that revealed private team dynamics. The league had no precedent for regulating these actions in the context of a digital era, and policies often lagged behind the speed of information flow. Even well-intentioned employees could create exposure risks, and the consequences were amplified by the viral nature of modern media. The psychological toll on players was compounded by the unpredictability of these leaks. Unlike public relations mistakes or on-field incidents, which could be managed and addressed through statements or apologies, internal leaks introduced uncertainty. Players had no control over who accessed private medical records, practice notes, or strategic discussions. They had no ability to anticipate when a confidential conversation might surface on social media. Trust, once foundational to the player-team relationship, became a fragile commodity. Front offices recognized the severity of the problem and implemented extensive measures to protect sensitive information. Policies were introduced regarding device usage, access permissions, and employee conduct. Teams restricted who could enter certain facilities, monitored communications more closely, and established protocols for handling confidential materials. Yet even these precautions could not fully mitigate the human element. Employees are not machines. Mistakes happen, judgment varies, and the lure of social media notoriety can be irresistible. The league quickly realized that the human factor remained the most unpredictable variable in the fight against leaks. The employee leak problem also had financial consequences. Teams invest millions in player development, medical care, and operational infrastructure. When internal information leaked, it could affect negotiations, player valuations, and strategic advantages. A single shared detail about injury status, contract negotiations, or practice performance could shift perceptions in ways that influence trades. roster decisions, and even betting lines. Internal leaks, therefore, were not just a privacy concern. They were a threat to competitive and economic stability. Players adapted to this reality in various ways. Some limited interactions with staff, preferring to conduct personal matters outside the presence of employees. Others sought to maintain meticulous records of conversations and interactions, attempting to anticipate what might be exposed. The psychological burden of constant vigilance weighed heavily, contributing to stress and anxiety. Teams, meanwhile, invested in training programs to educate employees on confidentiality, emphasizing the legal, professional, and personal consequences of leaks. The league realized that trust could no longer be assumed. It had to be actively cultivated and enforced. High-profile cases demonstrated the real-world consequences of employee leaks. One situation involved a practice squad member who recorded a controversial interaction between players and shared it online. The clip went viral, resulting in disciplinary action, public scrutiny, and an internal investigation. The team faced reputational damage. The players involved endured unwanted media attention, and management was forced to reevaluate security protocols. In another case, a video of a star quarterback making a critical comment during a meeting surfaced, sparking debates about leadership and loyalty. Both incidents underscored the fragile nature of internal trust and the high stakes of digital exposure. The employee leak problem also exposed a deeper cultural challenge within the league. The NFL's success relies on cohesion, coordination, and a shared understanding among all personnel. When internal leaks emerged, they threatened the collective identity of teams, sowing suspicion and undermining the sense of unity. Players, coaches, and executives were compelled to operate in an environment of caution, where even small gestures or offhand comments could be interpreted as potential breaches of confidentiality. Ultimately, internal leaks forced a reckoning for the NFL. The league had long focused on managing external narratives, press relations, public statements, and controlling the flow of information. Internal leaks exposed a vulnerability that could not be mitigated through traditional media strategies. They demanded a more sophisticated approach, one that accounted for human behavior, digital technology, and the rapid dissemination of information. The problem was not simply technological, it was psychological, cultural, and deeply human. The employee problem demonstrated that information security in the modern NFL extends beyond servers and firewalls. It depends on trust, ethics, and vigilance. Employees hold immense power because they are custodians of the league's secrets. Every interaction, every observation, every moment has the potential to escape the walls of the organization. Protecting the sanctity of teams in the digital age requires not only policy and enforcement, but also an understanding of human behavior and motivation. As the league grappled with this reality, players, coaches, and staff learned a hard lesson in the era of social media. The greatest threat often comes from within. The very people who support the operations care for players and maintain the daily functioning of teams could also be the source of exposure, whether intentional or accidental. Trust became both more essential and more fragile than ever before. Internal leaks were no longer minor concerns. They had become a defining challenge of the modern NFL, shaping behavior, altering narratives, and forcing the league to confront the uncomfortable truth that in a world dominated by instantaneous information, no secret is truly safe. Every employee, from the most junior intern to the most senior equipment manager, now occupies a role that carries both responsibility and risk. And the lessons learned from these incidents reverberate across every team, every contract, and every locker room, leaving a lasting imprint on the culture of the sport. There is a cruel immediacy to the digital age, a sense that a single moment, captured and shared, can define a life in an instant. In the NFL, where careers are measured in fleeting seasons and every opportunity is precious, scandals born from leaks have ended reputations overnight. These are not slow declines, not the gradual erosion of credibility through performance or decision-making. These are sudden, brutal moments when a video, a text, or a private exchange escapes into the public domain and transforms perception irrevocably. Consider the story of a highly touted rookie whose career promised superstardom. Early in his first season, he was involved in an altercation during a team practice, a heated exchange captured by a staff member's phone. What might have remained a minor incident within team walls became public the moment it was uploaded online. Analysts dissected his aggression, fans debated his character, and social media transformed the story into a narrative of volatility and unmanageability. Within days, the rookie's draft stock and endorsement opportunities were questioned. Coaches and management began reassessing their investment in him, worried that the perception created by a short clip could affect locker room dynamics. A career that had been carefully curated through years of preparation and scouting now teetered because of a single moment, frozen in digital time. Leaked scandals often thrive on context stripped away. A player's words or actions, understandable within the heat of competition or a personal conversation, are recast as evidence of poor judgment. One quarterback, known for his leadership and dedication, found himself in the eye of a storm when a locker room conversation, recorded and leaked, suggested frustration with teammates. The tone was misinterpreted, the circumstances ignored, and suddenly the media narrative painted him as divisive. His teammates felt the ripple, opponents sensed vulnerability, and fans began questioning loyalty. The footage did not lie, but it also did not tell the full story. In the digital age, truth is often secondary to the impression a clip can leave. These leaks not only damage individual players, but also erode trust across the league. The knowledge that a single misstep can be broadcast globally fosters paranoia and caution. Players guard themselves in locker rooms, limit their interactions, and second-guess casual comments. Emotional authenticity becomes a liability. Coaches alter communication styles, wary that any frustration, criticism, or correction could be misconstrued and disseminated. The natural rhythms of a team are interrupted, replaced by calculated self-preservation. High-profile scandals often create disproportionate consequences. A player who appears to curse at a coach or vent frustration during a sideline huddle can find the clip replayed endlessly on social media. Analysts, eager to assign blame or speculate, interpret motives that may not exist. Sponsors reconsider partnerships. Teams evaluate public relations risks alongside talent and performance. In a league where opportunity is finite and perception is currency, a leaked scandal can function as an invisible hand, reshaping careers before anyone touches a contract or makes a roster decision. One illustrative incident involved a wide receiver in the prime of his career. Private footage of him joking with friends at a personal event circulated online, suggesting behavior deemed inappropriate by public standards. The video was harmless in intent, a private moment of levity. Yet the narrative quickly shifted. Outlets reported on character concerns, teammates expressed unease, and fans debated morality rather than performance. The player issued an apology, yet the damage to reputation lingered. Endorsement deals were paused, and future contract negotiations became clouded by public perception rather than athletic merit. The emotional impact on players facing such leaks is profound. Careers built over decades, through sweat, sacrifice, and dedication, can be called into question in hours. The psychological toll is immense. Anxiety, loss of confidence, and the feeling of being trapped under relentless public scrutiny. Unlike the physical injuries of the sport, these are invisible wounds, but they are no less debilitating. Players describe a sense of violation as though a private life, meticulously managed to balance professionalism and personal freedom, has been ripped open for judgment without consent or context. Scandals also reveal systemic vulnerabilities. The NFL operates as a hyper-public institution, but the expectation of privacy for players remains essential. Leaks expose weaknesses in security, highlight insufficient policies, and underscore the human element that technology cannot fully control. Equipment managers, interns, administrative staff, and even teammates have the ability to capture content that can destroy reputations. The stakes are magnified because the league functions both as a high-stakes sport and as a global media product. Information travels faster than any PR response can manage. The combination of immediacy and permanence makes digital leaks uniquely dangerous. Unlike newspaper reports that could be corrected in print, social media allows content to persist indefinitely, replicated across platforms, shared in discussions, and archived by fans and journalists alike. Even if a video is removed, the memory remains. Screenshots, re-uploads, and commentary ensure that the narrative does not vanish. And the affected player must navigate a long-term reputational burden that may extend well beyond their playing days. It is also worth noting the disparities in how scandals affect players. Those with established reputations may weather the storm, leveraging their track record to mitigate damage. And opportunities that might have arisen from performance or talent can be overshadowed by perceived character flaws. Agents, coaches, and management must constantly weigh both athletic merit and public narrative when making decisions, creating a complex calculus in an environment where reputation is fragile and fleeting. One of the most insidious aspects of these leaks is how they shape the broader narrative of the league. The NFL has always sought to control its public image, emphasizing toughness, discipline, and professionalism. Leaks disrupt that control, showing vulnerability, conflict, and human error. Fans are drawn to the authenticity of raw, unfiltered moments, yet the cost to individuals is often catastrophic. The league faces a dilemma: protect its brand while acknowledging that the human element will always produce moments that defy containment. The speed at which scandals spread also affects the ability to respond effectively. Teams can issue statements, players can apologize, and analysts can attempt to provide context. But the viral nature of leaks often means that first impressions dominate. Within hours, narratives solidify, social media trends take hold, and the broader public often encounters only the initial framing. In this environment, players find themselves perpetually reacting rather than proactively controlling their story. Every moment is potentially magnified, dissected, and repurposed, creating an environment of constant vigilance and heightened stress. Ultimately, scandals that broke careers overnight illustrate the profound vulnerability of athletes in the modern NFL. No longer confined to performance on the field, the personal, private, and emotional lives of players exist under the constant gaze of digital media. Reputation has become as critical as talent, and perception often rivals statistics in determining opportunities. Careers can rise or fall, not on skill alone, but on a single leak, a single clip, or a single interpretation of a private moment. The league, players, and teams continue to grapple with this reality. Education programs, stricter policies, and internal protocols have emerged to mitigate risk, but the human element, combined with the speed of digital communication, ensures that vulnerability persists. Players are forced to navigate a delicate balance between authenticity and caution, performance and perception, competition and self-preservation. Scandals that emerge from leaked content are a defining feature of the NFL's modern landscape. They reveal the fragility of reputation, the immediacy of public scrutiny, and the emotional toll of living under constant observation. They are reminders that the sport, while physically demanding, is also psychologically and socially complex. Every player is aware that a single moment, captured outside of context, has the potential to rewrite their story entirely, leaving them to confront consequences that may last long after the game itself has ended. Leaks are often framed as threats, scandals, or breaches of trust, but in some instances, they have served a different, more consequential purpose. Beyond viral sideline clips, leaked texts, and private footage meant for a limited audience, there have been cases where exposure revealed underlying truths the league could no longer hide. Abuse, misconduct, hidden injuries, and internal corruption were brought into the light because someone inside the system chose to document, share, or whistleblow. These leaks, though controversial, forced accountability, prompted investigation, and reshaped the perception of the NFL as an institution operating with both immense influence and human fallibility. Consider the issue of player injuries, particularly concussions. For decades, the NFL relied on internal medical evaluations and team-controlled reporting to determine the health of athletes. Fans, media, and even team executives often assumed the reported information was complete and accurate. That assumption began to fracture when leaked medical reports and internal communications showed a different story. In several high-profile cases, documents revealed players returning to the field with serious head injuries, while staff discussions privately questioned the timing and risk. Leaks provided undeniable proof of systemic failures to protect players, forcing both the league and the public to confront uncomfortable truths. These revelations eventually contributed to legal action, policy reform, and a heightened awareness of the dangers of repeated head trauma. The leaked materials did not simply embarrass the league. They documented reality in a way that internal statements had failed to capture. Abuse and misconduct cases were similarly illuminated by leaks. Players and staff who experienced harassment or inappropriate behavior often lacked formal channels to report incidents safely. In some cases, recordings, text messages, or internal emails surfaced online, exposing actions that violated both ethical and legal standards. Leaked evidence forced investigations, sometimes resulting in suspensions, fines, or terminations. These leaks became the catalyst for accountability in a system historically resistant to scrutiny. They highlighted the disparity between what was reported publicly and what occurred privately, shining a light on the hidden dynamics that affected players' careers, mental health, and overall well-being. The case of hidden injuries further exemplifies the impact of leaks in promoting transparency. Some players, fearing reduced playing time, diminished contracts, or public criticism, concealed ailments from official reporting channels. Internal communications, video footage, or staff notes, when leaked, revealed discrepancies between what players endured and what management publicly acknowledged. These leaks created intense media coverage, questioning the ethical responsibility of teams and the league. While controversial, the exposure pushed the NFL toward more robust injury protocols, independent medical evaluations, and stricter oversight, all intended to safeguard player health. Corruption within teams and league management also came to light through leaks. Financial mismanagement, improper disciplinary actions, and violations of internal policy were exposed because employees or insiders documented and shared information. One notable example involved internal emails revealing inconsistencies in how fines and penalties were applied across teams. These documents, once leaked, fueled public scrutiny, media investigations, and ultimately, procedural reforms. They demonstrated that internal mechanisms designed to maintain fairness and accountability could be circumvented, and that transparency, however accidental, was essential to preserving the integrity of the game. Leaked communications frequently exposed the human cost behind statistical and performance metrics. Players were shown to be negotiating injuries, enduring unsafe conditions, or enduring pressures that were invisible to fans and analysts. The leak of a private video showing a player struggling with the physical demands of a grueling game prompted conversations about training practices, rest periods, and the ethical treatment of athletes. These incidents forced teams to reconcile the desire to win with the responsibility to protect those who play, a balance that had often been skewed toward performance at any cost. In some cases, leaks also corrected public misconceptions. Fans, media, and even league officials can misinterpret events without access to full information. Leaked footage, documents, or communications sometimes provided clarity, showing that accusations, rumors, or assumptions did not reflect the truth. These exposures allowed for a more accurate assessment of situations that might otherwise have been lost in speculation. They also demonstrated that not all leaks are harmful. Some serve as corrective mechanisms in an ecosystem dominated by selective storytelling. Leaked evidence revealing internal corruption underscored the fragility of trust within organizations. Team personnel, once assumed to act with integrity, were shown to prioritize self-interest, political advantage, or financial gain over transparency and fairness. These revelations catalyzed internal reviews, policy revisions, and in some cases, disciplinary action. For players, the knowledge that leaks could expose wrongdoing created both caution and empowerment. Caution, because any misstep could be publicized, and empowerment, because documentation could serve as protection or leverage in confronting abuse or mismanagement. The cultural impact of leaks exposing real issues cannot be overstated. They reframed how the public perceives the league, shifting from a purely entertainment-driven narrative to one that acknowledges the complexities, flaws, and responsibilities inherent in professional football. These leaks forced fans, analysts, and even team executives to confront uncomfortable realities, including the physical dangers players endure, the social and ethical responsibilities of organizations, and the human consequences of mismanagement. Legal and procedural outcomes were often direct results of these leaks. Class action lawsuits, league investigations, and policy changes frequently followed high-profile exposures. The leaked materials provided concrete evidence that could not be ignored. They prompted independent reviews and forced both transparency and accountability. In doing so, they challenged the traditional hierarchy of control within the NFL, demonstrating that authority could be checked not only through internal governance, but also through the unintended transparency that digital leaks provided. Leaked documentation, whether medical records, internal emails, or recordings of misconduct, revealed the consequences of systemic failures on an individual level. Players affected by injuries, misconduct, or mismanagement often faced physical, emotional, and financial ramifications. The exposure of these failures brought attention to the human cost of decisions made behind closed doors, reminding the public that professional football is not just about statistics or championships, but about real people whose lives can be profoundly affected by institutional practices. Ethical questions also emerged from these leaks. While the league often condemned leaks as breaches of trust or violations of confidentiality, the reality was more complex. Whistleblowers and insiders were sometimes revealing information in the interest of safety, fairness, or justice. The tension between protecting private organizational processes and ensuring accountability created a moral gray area. Players, employees, and the public had to grapple with the implications. When does the need for transparency outweigh the norms of secrecy? When does exposure serve justice rather than harm? Leaks that exposed real issues also highlighted the limits of traditional PR and media control. In previous eras, information could be managed, filtered, and delayed. Today, the speed and reach of digital communication ensured that leaks were immediate and often uncontrollable. Teams and league officials were forced to respond in real time, balancing the need for accuracy, legal compliance, and public messaging. In doing so, they acknowledged that the modern NFL exists in a dual reality, one in which the on-field performance is inseparable from the court of public scrutiny amplified by leaks. Ultimately, these leaks served as both a warning and a catalyst. They warned that secrecy in a digital age is fragile, that control over narratives can be fleeting, and that trust must be constantly maintained. At the same time, they catalyzed reform, accountability, and cultural awareness. By revealing hidden injuries, exposing misconduct, and documenting corruption, leaks reshaped the league in ways that official channels often could not achieve alone. They reminded players, staff, and fans that the NFL, for all its spectacle and entertainment, operates within a complex social, ethical, and human framework. Leaked truths revealed that vulnerability is not only physical, but also structural and ethical. The NFL's greatest challenge is not simply maintaining the flow of the game, but protecting the well-being, integrity, and dignity of those who participate in it. When leaks expose hidden realities, They become a mirror, reflecting both the flaws and the possibilities for reform within the institution. Players, teams, and the league itself are forced to confront questions that cannot be ignored. How to safeguard privacy, ensure accountability, and preserve trust, while recognizing that secrecy is no longer absolute. In the modern NFL, leaks that expose real issues are a paradoxical force. They disrupt, they challenge, and they sometimes end careers. Yet they also illuminate truths that would otherwise remain hidden. They compel accountability, initiate dialogue, and drive reforms. They reveal a deeper layer of the sport, one that is not measured in yards gained or points scored, but in ethics, responsibility, and human consequence. The digital age has ensured that these revelations are unavoidable, shaping the narrative of the league in ways that are permanent and irreversible. In the NFL, perception is as powerful as performance. A single highlight can define a career. A sideline gesture can shape public opinion. And, increasingly, a leaked clip or message can become a narrative unto itself. Yet, in the age of social media, leaks rarely arrive with full context. They are snippets, fragments, and fragments often misinterpreted. A single moment, removed from the circumstances that gave it meaning, can take on a life of its own, reshaping public perception, influencing media coverage, and altering the trajectory of players' or coaches' careers. This is the darker side of leaks, when incomplete information creates false realities that are consumed as absolute truth. Consider a situation involving a veteran linebacker known for his discipline and leadership. During a tense moment in a nationally televised game, he was recorded by a team intern appearing to argue aggressively with a young teammate. The clip, brief and lacking context, circulated on social media. Within hours, commentators labeled him a bully, suggesting he had fractured locker room cohesion. The public, lacking the insight into the high-pressure situation, did not understand that the argument arose from strategic instruction, frustration over repeated errors, and the veteran's attempt to motivate his teammate in a critical game. The leak presented only the surface of the interaction, and the resulting narrative became a permanent stain on the player's reputation, despite his history of mentorship and professionalism. This type of distortion is particularly insidious because it does not depend on intentional misrepresentation. Often, those responsible for leaks share material without malice, thinking it harmless or even entertaining. A sideline outburst, a locker room joke, or a heated exchange might be captured on a smartphone and posted online. The clip itself is real. The words were spoken, the gestures made. Yet stripped of context, the tension of a pivotal game, the prior interactions, the emotions fueling the exchange, the meaning is altered, often drastically. For the players and coaches involved, the experience is disorienting. They find themselves judged not on performance, skill, or intent, but on a distorted slice of reality. One of the most notorious cases involved a head coach whose post-game press conference was secretly recorded by a communications intern. In the clip, he appeared flustered and dismissive when answering questions about a controversial call, isolated from the broader context of a 90-minute interview and a grueling season of strategic pressure. The footage painted him as arrogant and unprofessional. Sports media amplified the clip. Fans shared it with judgmental commentary, and social media narratives crystallized around the idea of an unfit leader. Only later did full transcripts and additional video reveal that the coach had been managing multiple queries, maintaining confidentiality for sensitive team information, and exhibiting fatigue from the demands of the season. By that point, however, the initial perception had already done significant reputational damage. Distorted leaks have far-reaching consequences beyond personal reputation. They affect contract negotiations, endorsements, and internal team dynamics. Agents must navigate a landscape where public opinion, often driven by incomplete information, shapes leverage. Sponsors weigh associations not just on performance, but on perceived character. Teams, sensitive to media scrutiny and fan sentiment, may reconsider personnel decisions based on distorted narratives. In this way, a misrepresented moment can ripple across the league, influencing financial, strategic, and relational decisions. The emotional toll on individuals targeted by distorted leaks is substantial. Players describe feelings of helplessness, frustration, and betrayal. They are aware that the public will consume what is available, but they have no control over the framing, commentary, or spread. Attempts to clarify or provide context often fail to reach the same audience as the initial leak. The result is a lingering shadow over reputation, trust within the team, and confidence in their ability to navigate the public sphere. Coaches face similar pressures. A single misinterpreted gesture or phrase can dominate headlines, shift fan sentiment, and undermine authority, without reflecting actual competence or intent. Distorted leaks also challenge the league's traditional methods of narrative control. The NFL long relied on press releases, curated interviews, and managed highlights to shape public perception. Social media and internal leaks have rendered these methods less effective. Clips, messages, and documents can escape oversight instantly, often amplified by commentary and speculation. Even when official statements attempt to provide clarification, the original distorted narrative often persists. The league, players, and teams find themselves in a reactive posture, forced to address misperceptions rather than controlling the narrative proactively. High-profile examples abound. A quarterback's text conversation with an agent was leaked during contract negotiations, portraying him as disloyal to his team. The messages taken out of context suggested tension and dissatisfaction. Yet they reflected standard negotiation tactics rather than any intention to undermine the organization. Fans and media debated loyalty and professionalism, sometimes vilifying the player. Meanwhile, internal team leadership understood the nuances, but public opinion had already hardened around the leaked interpretation. Similarly, a defensive lineman's outburst during practice captured on video by an intern was circulated widely as evidence of temperamental instability, when in reality, it stemmed from the intensity of a playoff preparation session and brief miscommunication with coaching staff. Distorted leaks also illuminate the fragility of trust within teams. Players and coaches become cautious, questioning who can be relied upon in sensitive situations. Private moments that once allowed for candid feedback, strategy discussion, or emotional release are now constrained. Team cohesion, built on communication and authenticity, is undermined by the awareness that any moment can be reframed, misinterpreted, and weaponized digitally. Trust, already delicate in high-stakes environments, becomes even more difficult to sustain. The speed at which these distortions propagate exacerbates their impact. Within minutes, clips can reach millions of viewers, comments accumulate, and speculation solidifies into assumed fact. Correction or clarification often arrives too late, unable to reverse the narrative that has already taken hold. In the NFL, where public perception can influence everything from fan support to sponsorships, this delay is consequential. Even players who excel on the field may find their achievements overshadowed by misrepresented incidents, demonstrating how powerful a distorted leak can be. Importantly, distorted leaks are not always the result of malice. Often, they emerge from genuine mistakes, curiosity, or the pursuit of attention. Interns, staff members, or even teammates may capture and share content without fully understanding the consequences. Yet in the digital age, intention is secondary to impact. Once a leak circulates, the damage is measurable, real, and often irreversible. Players and coaches are left to manage both the personal fallout and the professional ramifications, navigating an environment in which the boundary between private and public has vanished. The phenomenon of distorted leaks also underscores the broader challenges of information management in professional sports. Teams must balance access with security, trust with oversight, and authenticity with caution. The speed, permanence, and global reach of digital media create an environment in which incomplete information can carry enormous weight. Every interaction, gesture, or communication becomes a potential risk factor. forcing players, coaches, and staff to consider the implications of exposure at all times. In many ways, these leaks highlight a profound tension in the NFL. Fans crave authenticity, desire access, and expect transparency. Yet the very mechanisms that provide this access, smartphones, social media, and internal recording devices, can distort the truth when context is missing. Players, coaches, and teams are caught between the demands of authenticity and the perils of exposure. A single misinterpreted moment can eclipse years of achievement, shifting attention from skill and performance to perceived flaws and misunderstandings. Distorted leaks reveal that reality in the modern NFL is not determined solely by what happens on the field. The narrative that defines careers, shapes public opinion, and influences the league is increasingly mediated by fragments of information. Players must navigate not only the physical demands of competition, but also the social and digital forces that shape perception. They learn to measure words, control gestures, and anticipate interpretation, all while striving to perform at the highest level. Ultimately, leaks that distort reality demonstrate the fragility of reputation in the age of instantaneous information. Context is fleeting, perception is powerful, and a single fragment of truth taken out of its full frame can have lasting consequences. Careers, relationships, and legacies can be shaped by incomplete information, leaving those involved to reconcile their private truths with the public narrative imposed upon them. The NFL, a league built on discipline, preparation, and competition, is forced to contend with a parallel arena, the digital world, where perception often outweighs fact, and where reality is sometimes less important than how it is portrayed. Coaching in the NFL has always been a delicate balance of strategy, psychology, and authority. A head coach or coordinator is not only responsible for game plans and personnel decisions, but also for maintaining discipline, motivation, and trust across a locker room filled with elite athletes. For decades, coaches could operate with a degree of privacy, discussing strategy in meeting rooms, adjusting schemes during practice, and speaking candidly with players. The rise of digital media and pervasive leaks, however, has fundamentally altered the culture of coaching, introducing a level of surveillance that has reshaped behavior, decision-making, and the very way football is taught and managed. The first challenge coaches encountered was the exposure of practice sessions. Practice is where experimentation occurs, where new plays are installed, and where weaknesses both in personnel and strategy are identified and corrected. Traditionally, these moments were shielded from public view. Coaches could make adjustments, call audibles, and correct mistakes without concern for external scrutiny. Leaks of practice videos changed that dynamic instantly. Clips showing drills, breakdowns, or player errors could spread online, analyzed by competitors, fans, and media alike. A single practice mistake, once private, could be dissected, critiqued, and transformed into a narrative about a coach's competence, philosophy, or the ability of a team to execute. Consider a coordinator whose innovative offensive scheme was being tested in practice. A video surfaced online showing a misread by the quarterback and a failed execution by a wide receiver. The context of a week-long process, the ongoing adjustments, and the trial-and-error nature of practice were lost. Analysts speculated about coaching failures, opponents studied tendencies, and fans drew conclusions about competence from a brief fragment of preparation. The leak altered perception and introduced an additional layer of pressure. Coaches realized that every movement, instruction, and correction could become public fodder, creating a need for constant vigilance, even in private settings. Private meetings with players were another casualty of surveillance culture. Coaches use meetings to provide feedback, discuss performance, and address sensitive issues. These sessions rely on candor and confidentiality. Leaks of meeting notes, audio, or video disrupt this environment. Players may hesitate to ask questions, admit mistakes, or engage fully when they know that anything discussed could later appear online. The natural flow of communication, the candid discussions that foster growth, accountability, and trust becomes constrained. Coaches must weigh the risk of openness against the necessity of honesty, fundamentally changing the way instruction occurs. The psychological effect on coaches has been profound. Leadership, once measured by competence, communication, and results, now contends with the reality of external judgment amplified by leaks. A minor frustration expressed during a sideline conference, a private reprimand in the locker room, or an offhand comment in a meeting can dominate headlines if captured and shared. Coaches describe a constant tension between authenticity and caution. They must motivate players, manage egos, and execute strategy while simultaneously performing under the scrutiny of a digital audience that has no context, no patience, and no understanding of nuance. Leaked strategic discussions have also had direct competitive consequences. In one documented instance, a video showing a defensive coordinator diagramming plays and calling audibles during practice circulated online. Opposing teams gained insight into formations, personnel groupings, and situational tendencies, potentially undermining weeks of preparation. Coaches now operate with the assumption that nothing is truly confidential. Every session is vulnerable, every play installation is observable, and every discussion may be replayed or dissected by rivals or the public. The stakes are not only reputational, they are tangible, measurable, and directly tied to wins and losses. Coaching under surveillance also affects mentorship and development. Assistant coaches, interns, and younger staff are essential to the learning environment, observing, questioning, and experimenting under guidance. When leaks expose internal dynamics, the freedom to teach, fail, and iterate is curtailed. Coaches must be guarded with feedback, and junior staff may hesitate to ask questions for fear of creating content that could be misused. The culture of growth, experimentation, and education is compromised, replaced by caution, guarded communication, and an underlying tension that pervades every interaction. Leaked meetings and strategy sessions also amplify media scrutiny. Analysts dissect every word and gesture, often ignoring the iterative nature of coaching. A coordinator explaining a defensive adjustment during a private session may be interpreted as evidence of incompetence or poor planning. Social media amplifies misinterpretations, creating public narratives that are difficult to counter. Coaches find themselves in a dual role, managing the team internally while constantly defending the team externally against narratives they cannot fully control. This surveillance culture has introduced new forms of accountability and adaptation. Coaches now limit phone usage during sensitive sessions, use secure communications platforms, and restrict who can access practice footage. Some have adopted more performative behaviors, knowing that all interactions might be recorded. Others emphasize documentation and internal verification to preempt criticism. These adaptations, while protective, also create friction and alter the authenticity of interactions. Leadership becomes performative, and the natural rhythms of coaching are disrupted. The emotional toll on coaches is often invisible, but real. Many describe feelings of frustration, exhaustion, and disillusionment. A lifetime spent mastering preparation, strategy, and player management is constantly subjected to external evaluation on incomplete or misleading evidence. Mistakes or frustrations that once remained internal are now amplified, with reputational and professional consequences that extend far beyond the field. The pressure to perform is compounded by the knowledge that private moments can become public judgment instantly. High-profile examples illustrate the stakes. A coach's sideline reaction to a failed play, captured on a staff member's phone, went viral, sparking debates about temperament and leadership. Another coach's private lecture to rookies, intended as a teaching moment, was leaked and criticized for tone and content, despite its educational purpose. In both cases, the leaks reframed ordinary coaching moments into stories of failure or controversy, demonstrating the precarious balance coaches must maintain in the age of digital surveillance. The surveillance culture also intersects with power dynamics. Coaches, historically the figures of authority, must now navigate relationships with players, staff, and media with heightened caution. The asymmetry of information, once a source of leverage, is diminished when internal discussions are recorded and shared. This redistribution of power challenges traditional hierarchies, forcing coaches to operate in a more cautious, reactive mode, where every decision is subject to potential exposure and critique. Ultimately, coaches under surveillance face a fundamental shift in their professional environment. The ability to teach, guide, and strategize in private has been compromised. Every meeting, practice session, and personal interaction carries the risk of becoming public. Leadership is now performed under constant observation, with the potential for reputational, professional, and competitive consequences if any moment is captured, misinterpreted, or leaked. The culture of coaching has adapted, but not without cost. Trust within teams, spontaneity in decision-making, and authenticity in player interactions are constrained. Coaches are forced to weigh transparency, privacy, and competitive advantage continuously. The digital era has transformed the role of the coach, revealing a new dimension of vulnerability that rivals even the physical and tactical demands of the game itself. The presence of leaks, the knowledge that any moment can be exposed, has reshaped behavior, altered relationships, and redefined leadership within the NFL. As the league continues to navigate this environment, coaches must reconcile the competing demands of performance, mentorship, and scrutiny. They must preserve the integrity of strategy while protecting their own reputations and maintaining trust within the team. In the modern NFL, coaching is no longer confined to the field or the meeting room. It exists in a dual reality, where every action may be captured, analyzed, and broadcast beyond the confines of the organization, forever altering the dynamics of authority, perception, and leadership. In the modern NFL, information is power, and the value of secrecy has never been higher. But as the stakes rose, a parallel phenomenon emerged: the rise of anonymous sources. Staff members, players, interns, and even coaches began feeding reporters information under the cloak of anonymity. These sources operated in a gray area between loyalty and exposure, motivated by leverage, revenge, personal gain, or, in some cases, the desire to reveal truth. The result was a culture where information could slip from inside the walls of the league into the public domain without warning, reshaping narratives, careers, and even organizational structures. Anonymous sources became a critical instrument in modern sports journalism, particularly as social media accelerated the speed at which stories spread. Reporters, aware of the demand for real-time updates, relied increasingly on these hidden informants. Insider tips, private emails, or undocumented incidents suddenly gained outsized influence. An anonymous message about a player's conduct, a coach's decision, or a team's internal struggle could be enough to dominate headlines. Yet, because the identity of the source was concealed, verification often relied on cross-referencing with leaks, corroboration from other sources, or instinctual trust in the reporter's network. The ambiguity itself created tension. Teams were left guessing who was responsible for the exposure, while the public consumed the narrative as truth. The motivations of anonymous sources were varied and often complex. Some sought leverage within the organization. A player unhappy with a coach, a staffer frustrated with management, or an assistant competing for promotion could use the media as a tool. By leaking information selectively, insiders could shift perception, create pressure, or influence decision-making from outside official channels. Anonymous disclosures became strategic maneuvers, weaponized to alter power dynamics without direct confrontation. Revenge was another powerful motivator. Employees or players who felt wronged, whether through disciplinary action, perceived slights, or lost opportunities, sometimes turned to leaks as a means of retaliation. A private text message, an internal email, or even a fragment of locker room conversation could suddenly appear in a public forum, reshaping reputations and affecting careers. The anonymity offered protection while still delivering consequences, creating an environment of uncertainty where trust was increasingly fragile. Fame and recognition also played a role. In a world where stories can go viral within hours, Insiders could achieve influence or notoriety without revealing their identity. Anonymous leaks sometimes functioned as signals to the outside world, demonstrating that someone knew the truth or had access to privileged information. While some sources were motivated by altruism or the desire to expose wrongdoing, others were drawn to the social and professional capital that came with being perceived as a conduit of secrets. The rise of online forums, sports blogs, and social media amplified this dynamic, turning leaks into currency. The consequences for players and coaches targeted by anonymous sources were immediate and unpredictable. Unlike overt leaks, where the source could be identified, internalized, or confronted, anonymous information created a climate of suspicion. Teams had to manage internal morale, investigate potential breaches, and maintain performance under the weight of speculation. Players often found themselves defending reputations against accusations they could not directly trace, while coaches faced pressure to maintain authority and cohesion despite the erosion of trust. High-profile cases illustrate the impact of anonymous sources. One instance involved reports about a star quarterback allegedly frustrated with a coordinator's play calling. The story, sourced anonymously, circulated across national outlets, generating public debate and influencing perceptions of locker room harmony. Despite the lack of verifiable evidence, the narrative gained momentum. Analysts, fans, and media consumed the story as plausible, in part because the cloak of anonymity conferred a sense of insider legitimacy. In reality, internal dynamics were far more nuanced, but the damage was done. Public trust, team perception, and even contract negotiations were affected. Anonymous sources also created tension within teams. Staff and players became hyper-aware that any statement, action, or communication could be reported. Trust, once foundational to coaching, mentorship, and teamwork, became conditional and fraught. Leaders had to navigate the challenge of motivating and guiding personnel while acknowledging the risk that private discussions could be reported. The balance between openness and caution shifted decisively, influencing the culture and psychology of professional football environments. Journalists, too, had to navigate ethical and practical dilemmas. Anonymous tips could break major stories, attract attention, and even spark reform, but reliance on unverified information carried risk. False or exaggerated claims could circulate, damaging reputations and eroding credibility. Reporters had to balance the pursuit of truth with the responsibility to avoid harm, often triangulating multiple sources or corroborating evidence before publication. In this way, anonymous sources fundamentally changed the rhythm and responsibility of NFL reporting, creating a complex ecosystem in which secrecy and exposure existed in constant tension. Leaked information from anonymous sources also intersected with broader systemic issues. Allegations of misconduct, mismanagement, or financial irregularities often emerged through this channel. In some cases, these leaks prompted investigations that exposed hidden truths. In others, misinformation spread confusion, leading to premature judgments and unnecessary scrutiny. The dual nature of anonymous sources as both potential catalysts for accountability and instruments of distortion made them one of the most consequential factors in shaping modern NFL narratives. The psychological and social impact on insiders was equally profound. Those who served as anonymous sources faced ethical dilemmas, fear of discovery, and the tension of influence without accountability. Many navigated the line between loyalty and exposure, grappling with the moral consequences of their actions. While some sought justice or reform, others acted out of self-interest or emotion. The very act of being an anonymous source became a form of power in an environment where information itself could dictate outcomes far beyond physical performance. The rise of anonymous sources also altered public perception of the league. Fans and media, aware that leaks could emerge from hidden insiders, began to consume information differently. The sense that someone always had access to behind-the-scenes knowledge created a climate of expectation and suspicion. Stories of internal discord, player misconduct, or strategic disagreements were often treated as credible based solely on the claim of insider knowledge. The line between verified fact and rumor blurred, placing players, coaches, and management in a constant state of public evaluation. This phenomenon reshaped league-wide culture. Leadership teams had to implement stricter protocols for information management, control access to sensitive material, and monitor internal communications more closely. Security measures, from restricted device usage to internal audits, became standard. At the same time, players and staff adjusted behavior, measured their interactions, and reconsidered private discussions. An environment that once encouraged open communication became one of cautious deliberation, where every word, message, or note could be a potential leak. Ultimately, the rise of anonymous sources highlights a profound tension in the modern NFL. The league operates as both a highly visible public entity and a private workplace. Information, power, and reputation are intertwined, and the emergence of concealed insiders amplifies both opportunity and risk. Careers can be shaped or disrupted, perceptions manipulated, and trust undermined, all without revealing the identity of the individual responsible for disclosure. Anonymous sources represent a modern reality of professional football, a game played not only on the field, but in the arena of information, perception, and secrecy. They challenge assumptions of loyalty, force constant vigilance, and redefine the balance of power between management, players, and media. For those within the league, the presence of anonymous sources is a daily consideration, shaping communication, relationships, and the very culture of the sport. In the digital age, knowledge is influence, and anonymity amplifies its consequences in ways both profound and unpredictable. In the NFL, the boundary between spectator and participant has always been distinct. Fans cheered from stands or living rooms. Analysts dissected tape, and journalists reported with access that was exclusive and curated. But in the era of social media, that boundary has blurred. The rise of fans as investigators, ordinary viewers who scrutinize video, track player movements, cross-reference statements, analyze data, has transformed the landscape. These fans, equipped with smartphones, high-definition cameras, and instant access to online platforms, began breaking NFL stories faster than many traditional journalists or insiders. Their investigations created a new ecosystem of accountability, rumor, and influence, one in which the league could no longer control the pace or framing of information. One of the earliest examples of this phenomenon involved a controversial play that went viral online. Fans, pausing frame by frame on broadcasts and leveraging slow-motion clips, identified nuances that even commentators had missed. Within hours, online forums and social media threads presented detailed analysis, speculating on rule violations, player positioning, and coaching decisions. By the time journalists attempted official reporting, the narrative had already solidified, shaped by a community of dedicated fan investigators. The league, accustomed to controlled media messaging, now faced a decentralized, unpredictable form of scrutiny. These fan-driven investigations extended beyond game footage. Leaked images, sideline recordings, and publicly accessible social media posts became tools for fans to piece together hidden aspects of team operations. For instance, fans analyzed images of practice fields, uniforms, and equipment to uncover injuries that teams had officially downplayed. They tracked player behavior on and off the field, correlating timestamps and locations to speculate about internal dynamics or personnel decisions. In some cases, fans uncovered subtle signals indicating potential trades, suspensions, or roster changes before official announcements. The immediacy and rigor of fan analysis challenged the NFL's historical control over information flow. The motivations of fan investigators varied widely. Some sought to gain prestige within online communities, becoming known as reliable sources for insider information. Others were driven by pure curiosity or desire to expose perceived wrongdoing. Many fans approached their investigations with journalistic rigor, citing sources, cross-referencing data, and producing analyses rivaling professional reporting. The combination of expertise, technology, and motivation created a formidable force capable of influencing perception, narratives, and even decision-making within teams and the league. A key turning point was the intersection of fan analysis with leaked content. Clips from practices, locker rooms, or press conferences, once circulated online, were quickly dissected by fan communities. Each frame was examined for context, intention, and implication. A sideline gesture, a subtle interaction, or a moment of visible frustration became evidence for broader narratives about leadership, chemistry, or performance. The collective analysis of fans, often faster and more meticulous than traditional journalism, amplified the impact of leaks and created an additional layer of scrutiny that teams had not previously encountered. The implications for players and coaches were immediate. Athletes became aware that even minor behaviors could be captured, analyzed, and interpreted in ways they had not anticipated. Coaches faced the reality that strategic decisions, interpersonal interactions, and teaching moments could be dissected by fans with access to replay technology and archival resources. The culture shifted from one where errors or moments of tension could remain contained to one in which digital traces were permanent, public, and subject to relentless analysis. Fan investigations also had tangible effects on narratives and decision-making. A leaked sideline discussion, once dissected by fans online, could pressure coaching staff to adjust communication style, alter messaging, or respond publicly. Player behavior, scrutinized in meticulous detail, could influence contract negotiations, endorsements, and public perception. Even subtle social interactions, handshakes, facial expressions, or sideline positioning were interpreted as signals with potential consequences. The NFL, once confident in controlling its stories, found itself operating in a new arena where the crowd, armed with cameras and analytical tools, dictated the speed, framing, and interpretation of events. High-profile instances underscore the influence of fan investigators. In one case, fans analyzing player statistics alongside publicly shared team videos identified discrepancies between reported and observed playtime, raising questions about injury management and transparency. In another, online sleuths cross-referenced social media posts, practice schedules, and team announcements to predict trades or suspensions days before official confirmation. These investigations, while sometimes speculative, demonstrated that fans were no longer passive observers. They were active participants, shaping the narrative and challenging the league's information control. The emotional impact on the league's personnel was significant. Players described feelings of vulnerability, knowing that fans could observe, interpret, and publicly critique their every move. Coaches and staff expressed frustration at the speed and reach of fan-led investigations, recognizing that even minor missteps could escalate into amplified controversies. Teams were forced to implement stricter information protocols, monitor online chatter, and address rumors proactively, acknowledging that the collective analysis of fans could rival or even surpass traditional media in influence and immediacy. Fan investigators also disrupted the traditional hierarchy of sports journalism. Where reporters once held a monopoly on breaking news and analysis, social media communities could circulate observations, often reaching millions within hours. Professional journalists were compelled to adapt, incorporating fan-sourced information, cross-referencing online discoveries, and responding to narratives already in motion. The dynamic created a feedback loop. Leaks fueled fan investigation. Investigation amplified leaks, and the resulting narratives pressured teams to react in real time. The rise of fan investigators also highlighted broader cultural shifts. Audiences no longer passively consume narratives curated by teams, media, or league communications. They actively engage, research, and interpret, blending fandom with analysis. The collective intelligence of these communities can surface issues, corroborate leaks, or uncover hidden truths. However, the potential for misinterpretation, selective framing, and viral rumor also introduces risk, as incomplete or misleading information can circulate as truth, shaping perception and influencing outcomes. Importantly, the phenomenon of fan investigation demonstrates the democratization of information in professional sports. Whereas access was once mediated by official channels, fans now act as decentralized analysts, wielding technological tools, analytical skills, and collective knowledge. Their investigations can correct misreporting, challenge official statements, or highlight overlooked details. At the same time, they amplify the consequences of leaks, transforming private moments into public narratives and intensifying the pressures faced by those within the league. The dual nature of fan investigations is empowering for transparency, yet potentially distortive, reflects the broader challenge of information management in the NFL. Teams, players, and coaches operate in a high-stakes environment, now with the added complexity of an informed, technologically capable audience. Every moment, every interaction, and every communication carries the possibility of exposure, analysis, and interpretation far beyond the control of the league itself. The implications extend from personal reputations to organizational strategy, contract negotiations, and public perception. Ultimately, a rise of fans as investigators underscores the new reality of the NFL. The game is no longer confined to the field or media channels controlled by the league. It exists in a distributed, participatory environment where information is decentralized. Narratives are co-created, and scrutiny is relentless. Players and coaches must adapt to this dual reality, balancing performance with perception, privacy with transparency, and authority with accountability. Fans, armed with digital tools and investigative tenacity, have become a permanent and influential presence, forever altering the dynamics of professional football. The NFL has long been a master of spectacle, a league where narrative and performance intertwine to create not just a game, but a story consumed by millions each week. For decades, public relations was the invisible force shaping how the league, teams, and players were perceived. Press releases, carefully staged interviews, and controlled media access ensured that the stories reaching fans aligned with the league's desired narrative. Yet the rise of leaks, social media, and rapid information sharing created a fundamental challenge: controlling the uncontrollable. No press release, no media blackout. No crisis plan could fully contain information once it entered the digital ecosystem. The league's attempts to centralize control over its public image evolved into a relentless, ongoing PR war, one that often failed despite its scale and resources. The origins of the PR war trace back to early high-profile leaks that shook the league. As private information, medical reports, and strategic decisions found their way online, the NFL recognized that traditional public relations strategies, statements, press conferences, or controlled interviews were insufficient. The immediacy of digital dissemination meant that leaks could occur faster than the league could respond. Within minutes, rumors became narratives, speculation became news, and the official voice of the league struggled to compete with the speed and reach of social media. What was once a game of careful message management became a reactive struggle to shape perception after the fact. Centralizing control involved several strategies. Teams invested heavily in digital monitoring, employing PR professionals to track online activity, detect leaks, and respond to emerging stories. Legal teams became intimately involved in policing leaks, issuing warnings, or pursuing litigation against those who violated confidentiality agreements. The league also developed centralized communication protocols, attempting to standardize messaging, control media access, and limit exposure of sensitive information. Coaches and players received training on social media conduct, emphasizing caution, consistency, and alignment with organizational narratives. Despite these efforts, the environment remained volatile. The failure of centralized PR efforts often stemmed from the sheer volume and velocity of information. Smartphones, Wearable cameras and social media platforms created a network in which a single staff member, player, or intern could disseminate sensitive material instantly. Once a leak occurred, the league's response mechanisms, statements, clarifications, or official narratives lagged behind the speed of public consumption. Even well-crafted messages could be drowned out by viral clips, fan speculation, and anonymous sourcing. Attempts to control the narrative became exercises in damage limitation rather than proactive storytelling. One striking example involved the leak of a practice video showing a controversial coaching decision. Within minutes, clips circulated online, fans analyzed them frame by frame, and pundits speculated about strategy and player competency. The league issued a statement attempting to contextualize the footage, explaining that the play was part of an experimental series during practice. Yet by the time the statement reached the broader audience, the narrative of coaching incompetence had already taken hold. Analysts debated the decision for days, social media commentary intensified, and team staff faced internal pressure from media and fans alike. The PR intervention, though professional and timely, could not reverse the momentum created by the leak. The human element contributed to these failures. Employees, players, and insiders often acted unpredictably, sometimes inadvertently leaking information despite protocols. Smartphones, messaging apps, and cloud storage created pathways that were difficult to monitor fully. Even well-meaning individuals could contribute to information escaping the intended channels. The league's centralized PR apparatus, no matter how sophisticated, struggled to manage a dispersed, decentralized environment where the boundaries between public and private were porous and constantly shifting. High-profile controversies illustrate the stakes of the PR war. One incident involved a player's off-field conduct captured by a fan and shared online. Despite immediate efforts to contain the story, the clip went viral, fueling public debate and media speculation. The league issued statements, teams released clarifications, and the players' representatives attempted to provide context, but the original narrative persisted. Public perception, once shaped primarily by official channels, was now influenced by uncontrolled digital amplification. The incident highlighted the limitations of centralized control in a networked, participatory media environment. Another challenge was the tension between transparency and damage control. Fans increasingly demanded access to behind-the-scenes moments, private interviews, and candid insights into player behavior. The league sought to accommodate this interest while maintaining protective boundaries around sensitive information. Yet in doing so, it often created opportunities for leaks to emerge. For example, limited access media sessions intended to build transparency sometimes resulted in fragments being shared online, misinterpreted, or taken out of context. The desire to control the narrative while meeting audience expectations created a paradox, intensifying the difficulty of centralized PR management. The PR war also reshaped the relationship between teams and media. Journalists, now competing with fans and social media communities for breaking news, demanded access to sources, footage, and insider perspectives. The league's attempts to control narratives sometimes clashed with journalistic imperatives, creating tension and adversarial dynamics. Teams had to navigate these relationships carefully, balancing transparency, accountability, and strategic messaging. Leaks complicated this balance further, as reporters relied on fragments of information, often from anonymous sources, to generate stories that could amplify or distort internal developments. Technology accelerated the challenges. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok enabled real-time dissemination of video clips, screenshots, and rumors. Hashtags, threads, and viral content allowed stories to reach millions before official statements could be drafted or reviewed. Algorithms amplified sensational or controversial material, rewarding engagement over accuracy. The league, facing an environment where speed often outweighed context, found itself constantly reacting rather than controlling the flow of information. Centralized PR teams, despite rigorous planning and substantial resources, operated in a digital ecosystem beyond their full control. The psychological impact on players, coaches, and staff was profound. The awareness that private moments could become public created heightened stress, self-monitoring, and cautious behavior. Athletes became aware that gestures, comments, or mistakes could dominate headlines, overshadowing performance. Coaches adapted strategies for communication and instruction, often modifying language and behavior to minimize potential leaks. Organizational culture shifted as a result, reflecting not only concern for on-field performance, but also vigilance against the reputational risks posed by the digital landscape. Yet despite the challenges, the league adapted in incremental ways. PR teams developed rapid response units, integrated social media monitoring with legal oversight, and implemented internal training for staff on confidentiality and digital conduct. Players received education on messaging, posting, and public engagement. Policies were updated to emphasize accountability and risk mitigation. Still, even the most sophisticated systems could not fully replicate the speed, breadth, and unpredictability of leaks in a decentralized, digital-first environment. The war for narrative control remained ongoing, often reactive and sometimes futile. Ultimately, the PR war in the NFL demonstrates a fundamental shift in the balance of power. The league no longer exclusively dictates the story. Leaks, social media amplification, fan investigation, and anonymous sourcing have decentralized control, creating a dynamic where narratives emerge from multiple, often uncontrollable channels. The league's centralized efforts, while necessary and professional, are now one voice among many, competing in a complex ecosystem where information moves faster than policy, and perception often outweighs fact. This struggle reshapes not only public relations, but the very culture of professional football. Players, coaches, and staff must operate under constant awareness of exposure. Strategic decisions, interpersonal interactions, and personal conduct are scrutinized in real time. Centralized PR can guide, clarify, and respond, but the underlying reality is clear. Control over information is increasingly illusory. The NFL has entered a new era, one in which narrative battles are waged continuously. And the league must contend with forces that are faster, broader, and far less predictable than any game plan could anticipate. The NFL has always been a business as much as it is a sport. A high-stakes environment where player performance, contracts, and organizational strategy intersect in complex ways. But in the age of social media and pervasive leaks, teams discovered a new tool for influence: the weaponization of information. Front offices, recognizing that public perception could be shaped through carefully timed disclosures, began using leaks to manipulate trades, negotiate salaries, and sway narratives about their own players. This practice, subtle yet powerful, transformed internal relationships, trust, and the dynamics of player management, creating a landscape in which athletes could be undermined, not on the field, but in the court of public opinion. Historically, teams relied on conventional leverage, contracts, performance incentives, and private negotiations. The public played little role in internal disputes, but the immediacy of information in the digital era changed that calculus. A strategically leaked story, whether a narrative about a player's dissatisfaction, a locker room issue, or an alleged disagreement with coaches, could alter perception and pressure the player to accept a trade, renegotiate terms, or comport themselves publicly in alignment with the team's interests. Once the story circulated online, fans, media, and even other players absorbed it as evidence, often reinforcing the team's intended outcome. One of the first documented cases involved a player widely regarded as a rising star. A sudden report emerged online, claiming he was unhappy with his contract, unwilling to attend meetings, or difficult to manage. The source was anonymous, the context partial, yet the impact was immediate. Analysts speculated about locker room tension, rival teams expressed interest, and the player faced public scrutiny before he could respond. The team, aware of the leak's influence, leveraged the narrative during negotiations. ultimately securing a contract extension with terms favorable to management. The leak became a mechanism of control, shaping perception in a way that traditional negotiation tactics could not. This approach relies on subtlety and timing. Leaks are rarely overt. They are fragments, hints, or carefully selected quotes that hint at tension, dissatisfaction, or underperformance. By controlling what is exposed, when and through which channels, teams can craft narratives that serve strategic purposes. The result is a complex game of influence, where players, fans, media, and front office leadership participate unknowingly in a carefully orchestrated flow of perception. The ethical implications are significant, as the very tool designed to advance organizational goals can undermine trust, morale, and loyalty. Leaked narratives also influence trade dynamics. Public perception can enhance or diminish a player's market value, affect rival interest, and create pressure for action. A player perceived as troublesome or disloyal, even based on partial or inaccurate leaks, may see opportunities limited, endorsements curtailed, or leverage reduced. Conversely, a strategically positive leak can enhance reputation, increase fan support, or signal organizational priorities to other teams. Front offices recognize that controlling narrative outside official channels provided a competitive advantage, turning information into a transactional asset alongside draft picks, salary cap maneuvering, and personnel decisions. The impact on players is profound. In a system designed for performance-based evaluation, reputation becomes inseparable from perception. Athletes must navigate a dual reality: their on-field production and their off-field image, which may be shaped by narratives they did not create. Trust within the organization can erode as players realize that leaks may originate from sources they previously considered allies, such as coaches, agents, or even teammates. The line between strategic communication and manipulation blurs, leaving players in a constant state of vigilance and self-consciousness. Consider the effect on team culture. A locker room where information is weaponized is inherently tense. Players may hesitate to speak openly, fearing that private statements could appear online and influence management decisions. Relationships between athletes, coaches, and executives become transactional, guided by perception rather than authentic engagement. Team cohesion, long considered a cornerstone of NFL success, is compromised by the specter of leaks, creating an environment where self-preservation competes with collaboration. Front offices also leverage leaks to influence media narratives. By providing partial information to journalists or allowing stories to surface anonymously, teams can direct attention, shape public sentiment, and manage the pace of controversy. These leaks may exaggerate minor issues, downplay positive developments, or selectively highlight player weaknesses. The media, often eager for insider insight, amplifies these narratives, while fans absorb and react to information presented as factual. The cycle reinforces the team's strategic objective, creating influence that extends beyond traditional negotiation tactics. The weaponization of leaks is not limited to conflict. It can also serve as motivation. Stories hinting at dissatisfaction or alleged underperformance can pressure players to respond publicly or perform at higher levels. In some cases, management has acknowledged informally that strategic exposure of information can push players toward desired behaviors. Whether greater accountability, improved training efforts, or public alignment with organizational messaging. This subtle form of manipulation highlights how information can become a tool of control, not just a reflection of reality. High-profile cases illustrate the stakes. A veteran player respected for leadership and consistency found himself the subject of a leak suggesting he was critical of younger teammates and resistant to coaching guidance. The story gained traction on social media, generating public commentary and speculation about his role on the team. Internally, management leveraged the narrative to justify a trade that the player might otherwise have resisted. While his on-field performance had been exemplary, the leaked story altered perception, demonstrating how carefully timed information can shift power dynamics within an organization. Legal and ethical boundaries are tested in this environment. Players may feel their rights to privacy are violated, while teams operate in a gray zone where leaks are technically unofficial but serve strategic purposes. The lack of transparency creates ambiguity about accountability, leaving athletes unsure whether to confront, ignore, or adapt to the situation. In this sense, leaks become not only a tool of manipulation, but also a psychological mechanism, influencing behavior indirectly while maintaining plausible deniability for the organization. The cultural implications extend beyond individual teams. As stories of leaks and manipulations circulate, they influence player decisions league-wide. Athletes entering free agency, negotiating contracts, or assessing organizational culture consider the risk of being undermined through public narrative. Trust, once an assumed foundation, becomes contingent, shaping career decisions and loyalty. The ripple effect alters league dynamics, emphasizing perception management as a critical skill alongside athletic ability. Ultimately, teams turning on their own players illustrates a shift in power structures within the NFL. The traditional model, in which performance determined opportunity and reputation, now exists alongside a parallel reality where information itself is a form of currency. Leaks are weaponized to influence perception, manipulate outcomes, and control behavior. Athletes must navigate not only the physical and tactical challenges of the game, but also the complex, often invisible dynamics of reputation, loyalty, and narrative warfare. In this new environment, success depends not only on physical prowess, but on awareness, adaptability, and reputation management. Players and coaches are forced to operate in dual spheres: the field, where execution is measurable, and the arena of perception, where information, rumor, and strategic leaks can dictate outcomes. Understanding the stakes of both worlds has become essential to survival in the modern NFL. The era of internal leaks demonstrates that the league is as much a theater of information as it is of athletic competition. Front offices, empowered by digital communication and media dynamics, have discovered that reputation can be manipulated, trades influenced, and contracts guided through strategic exposure. For players, this means navigating a landscape where performance alone is insufficient. Trust, perception, and vigilance are now as vital as speed, strength, and skill. The modern NFL is a battlefield that extends far beyond the white lines of the field. For decades, players were largely at the mercy of media narratives, organizational messaging, and the strategic leaks of front offices. Careers could be defined, altered, or destroyed by stories in which athletes had little input. But in the last decade, a new phenomenon emerged: players fighting back. Armed with smartphones, social media platforms, and direct access to fans, athletes began reclaiming control of their narrative, preempting leaks, exposing internal dynamics, or publicly defending themselves against misinformation. This shift has transformed the balance of power, allowing players to engage in a new form of strategic communication that can be as impactful as a decisive play on the field. Social media has become the player's megaphone. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok offer instantaneous access to millions of followers, allowing athletes to frame stories on their own terms. When a leak emerges, players can respond immediately, providing context, correcting misinformation, or asserting their perspective before the narrative solidifies. This immediacy disrupts the traditional flow of information, which once relied on journalists, official statements, and league channels. Now, athletes can challenge perception in real time, transforming passive consumption into interactive, audience-driven engagement. The strategy of preempting leaks is especially powerful. Some players, anticipating scrutiny or internal tension, proactively share updates or clarifications to avoid misinterpretation. By controlling the timing, medium, and framing of information, they can shape perception and mitigate the impact of unauthorized disclosures. For example, an athlete dealing with a minor injury might post a video or statement clarifying the situation before speculation spreads, preventing rumors from affecting contract negotiations, media narratives, or fan perception. In this way, players are no longer passive subjects, but active participants in managing their reputations. In addition to clarifying misinformation, athletes have increasingly used social media to expose internal issues. From highlighting inadequate medical attention to revealing mismanagement in practice or travel arrangements. Players can bring transparency to matters traditionally hidden behind closed doors. While these disclosures carry risk, they also shift power dynamics, placing accountability on organizations that might otherwise operate with minimal scrutiny. Some players have leveraged viral platforms to amplify these messages, generating public pressure that forces teams to respond quickly and transparently. A notable example involved a quarterback confronting rumors about discord in the locker room. Anonymous reports had circulated suggesting tension with coaches and teammates, threatening both his reputation and negotiating position. Instead of remaining silent, he posted a measured video on his social media account, directly addressing the issue. In the statement, he acknowledged challenges, reinforced team cohesion, and emphasized performance accountability. The result was immediate. Fans, media, and analysts reconsidered the narrative, framing the situation as a minor internal matter rather than a major disruption. The leak's potential damage was neutralized, demonstrating the efficacy of proactive, player-controlled communication. Players also use social media to humanize themselves and create emotional connections with fans, reinforcing loyalty that can insulate them from negative narratives. Personal stories, charitable efforts, or candid reflections on challenges can counterbalance leaks that might otherwise define them. By controlling how they are perceived outside the lens of internal politics or partial information, athletes build a resilient public identity that reduces the effectiveness of manipulative leaks. In some cases, the strategic cultivation of audience support has even influenced contract negotiations, endorsements, and career trajectory, proving that perception management is now as crucial as physical performance. The psychological impact of this empowerment is profound. Players who once felt vulnerable, subject to narratives shaped without their input, now possess tools for agency. Social media offers a direct channel to the public, a platform to respond instantly, and a means to assert control in situations previously dominated by others. This shift also introduces a layer of strategy, requiring athletes to consider timing, tone, and audience reaction. Communication becomes a skill set as critical to career management as on-field execution. Yet the approach is not without risk. A miscalculated post can exacerbate the problem, draw further scrutiny, or be misinterpreted in ways that amplify the original leak. The public nature of social media means that responses must be precise, consistent, and credible. Players must weigh the benefits of transparency against potential consequences, often navigating complex, legal, organizational, and personal dynamics. In some cases, teams have sought to provide guidance on messaging, highlighting the evolving intersection between player agency and organizational oversight. Players fighting back also represents a broader cultural shift within the league. The traditional power imbalance, in which front offices and media narratives dominated perception, is being recalibrated. Athletes now understand that information is not only a potential threat, but also a tool. By strategically controlling the flow of their own stories, they can protect careers, influence public opinion, and hold organizations accountable. This shift alters the psychological environment, fostering a culture in which players are active participants in the construction of their own legacies rather than passive subjects. High-profile incidents illustrate the stakes. One running back, facing rumors about dissatisfaction with coaching decisions, circumvented traditional media entirely, posting a detailed narrative directly to fans. He included both context and personal perspective, emphasizing commitment to the team while clarifying inaccuracies. The response was immediate. Journalists reported on his statement. Analysts reassessed prior assumptions, and fans engaged directly with his account, reshaping the narrative entirely. The leak that might have threatened his reputation was neutralized. and the player demonstrated a model for leveraging digital tools to assert control. The rise of player-driven narrative management also intersects with the broader media ecosystem. Analysts, reporters, and social media commentators now compete with players' own messaging, resulting in a more decentralized information landscape. While journalists provide analysis and verification, the athlete's voice is often the most immediate and influential factor in shaping public understanding. Fans increasingly rely on direct statements from players, treating them as primary sources in real time, a reversal of traditional media hierarchy. This empowerment has consequences for league dynamics. Teams must now anticipate not only how leaks might emerge, but also how players might respond, adjusting internal communication, disciplinary protocols, and public messaging. Coaches and executives must navigate a dual reality, maintaining authority while respecting the athlete's ability to assert agency. Relationships are reshaped as mutual trust must accommodate the reality of public engagement, digital transparency, and potential narrative intervention by the player. Ultimately, players fighting back represents a fundamental recalibration of the NFL information ecosystem. Social media provides agency in an environment previously dominated by leaks, PR strategies, and anonymous insiders. Athletes who master this new terrain can protect reputation, influence perception, and even shape organizational outcomes. The interplay between leaks and proactive communication creates a dynamic in which both threat and opportunity coexist. And success depends on understanding not only the game on the field, but the game of narrative in the digital age. In this new reality, the NFL is no longer solely a league of athletic skill and coaching acumen. It is a league where the management of information, perception, and personal narrative can define careers as decisively as touchdowns or tackles. Players who embrace this dimension gain a form of power once unavailable, while those who underestimate it risk exposure, misrepresentation, and damage beyond the gridiron. The struggle over information, perception, and control has become a defining feature of professional football, and the rise of player agency demonstrates that even in a system built on hierarchy, innovation and strategy can emerge from the field itself. In a sport defined by strategy, execution, and split-second decision-making, information is the most valuable currency outside of physical talent. Coaches spend hours crafting game plans, analyzing opponents, and preparing contingencies for every conceivable scenario. Players memorize assignments, study tendencies, and anticipate the opposition's moves. Yet, in the era of pervasive leaks, the carefully constructed world of preparation can be disrupted, not by an unexpected blitz or a missed coverage, but by the sudden, uncontrolled release of information. Leaks of playbooks, injury statuses, or tactical decisions can directly influence the outcome of games, creating a new battlefield where knowledge itself is weaponized. The first notable incidents emerged subtly. Analysts and fans began noticing that certain in-game tendencies were being anticipated by opponents in ways that seemed improbable. Initial explanations focused on observation, film study, or scouting reports. But over time, a pattern became clear. Confidential information, intended only for the team and coaching staff, was somehow circulating beyond the locker room. Whether through internal leaks, external access, or digital exposure, opponents gained insights into formations, audibles, and strategic tendencies, altering the competitive balance. Coaches and players realized that the threat was no longer purely physical, but informational. One case involved a mid-season clash between two high-ranking teams. A leaked injury report had identified a key offensive lineman as limited due to a knee issue. The opposing defensive coordinator, aware of the vulnerability, designed a game plan that targeted the weakened position relentlessly. Every snap, every assignment, and every stunt was executed with surgical precision. The result was a decisive victory for the team exploiting the leaked information. And the losing side faced both tactical and reputational consequences. The incident demonstrated that even seemingly minor leaks, details about health, readiness, or personnel could translate directly into competitive advantage. Leaked playbooks present an even more pronounced risk. In an environment where a single formation or audible can determine the outcome of a game, access to an opponent's planned sequences is invaluable. Digital copies, photos, or even verbal recounting by employees or insiders can provide opponents with the knowledge to anticipate plays, counter strategies, and neutralize advantages. Teams have responded with heightened security measures, including encrypted files, limited access protocols, and compartmentalization of sensitive information. Yet the decentralized nature of modern communication, combined with social media proliferation, makes containment nearly impossible. The psychological impact of game-influencing leaks cannot be understated. Players aware that strategic information might have been compromised experience heightened stress and uncertainty. Trust in internal processes erodes as athletes question whether their preparation, effort, or coordination is fully effective. Coaches face the challenge of adjusting plans mid-week, often implementing contingency strategies to counteract potential exposure. In extreme cases, teams alter personnel or shift responsibilities to mitigate the perceived effects of leaks. The result is a constant tension between preparation and adaptability, with the looming threat of information compromise adding a layer of mental fatigue. High-profile examples illustrate the stakes vividly. One quarterback, after a critical game, revealed frustration with leaked defensive tendencies. Analysts noted that the opposing team had anticipated key audibles, leading to a game-turning interception, while official reports framed the loss as a combination of execution errors and opponent skill. Insiders privately acknowledged that strategic leaks had played a decisive role. In this environment, victories and defeats were no longer determined solely by physical performance, but also by the integrity and security of information. Leaks influence more than just tactical outcomes. They also affect broader season trajectories. A single compromised playbook can lead to unexpected losses, altering playoff standings, affecting morale, and influencing front office decisions. Teams may respond with increased secrecy, limiting player access to certain strategic information, which in turn can hinder cohesion and trust. The ripple effect of a leak is complex. Immediate competitive disadvantage combines with long-term organizational disruption, illustrating that information security is now as critical as on-field execution. Another dimension involves injury disclosures. Historically, injury reports were carefully managed to balance transparency with strategic concealment. However, leaked medical details can expose teams to criticism, pressure from media, and exploitation by opponents. Knowledge of a player's physical limitations allows rivals to adjust tactics, target vulnerabilities, and potentially change the outcome of critical plays. Teams have invested heavily in internal protocols, controlling access to medical data and implementing digital safeguards. But the threat persists, fueled by the speed and reach of modern communication networks. Even practices and meetings are vulnerable. Video clips, photographs, or recordings, once leaked, provide opponents with insights into scheme adjustments, player responsibilities, and strategic priorities. Coordinators may identify patterns in blocking, coverage, or motion that allow for predictive planning. The analytical power of such leaks is amplified by video technology, frame-by-frame breakdowns, and online fan or analyst communities that dissect every detail. In some cases, small exposures in practice can cascade into significant in-game consequences, demonstrating the delicate balance between preparation, secrecy, and execution. The league has recognized that leaks influencing games represent a unique existential challenge. Unlike reputation-damaging leaks, which affect perception and careers, competitive leaks directly alter the fairness and integrity of play. Teams have responded with policies designed to limit internal access, implement strict confidentiality agreements, and monitor for suspicious information flows. Legal actions and disciplinary measures have been applied in egregious cases, signaling the seriousness with which the league treats breaches that can impact outcomes. Yet enforcement is reactive, and in the fast-paced, technologically enabled environment of modern football. Containment is rarely immediate or comprehensive. Players and coaches also adapt strategically. Some teams employ multiple game plans, shifting formations and audibles to create redundancy and misdirection. Key players may be given alternate responsibilities to mitigate risk if leaks occur. Contingency planning has become a staple of NFL preparation, reflecting the recognition that in addition to physical opponents, teams must contend with informational vulnerabilities that rival any defensive scheme. This dual-layered approach underscores the elevated stakes in a league where knowledge is power and exposure can be as decisive as execution. The cultural impact is equally significant. Teams increasingly view internal communication, practice access, and digital security as critical aspects of competitive performance. Players are educated on confidentiality, staff roles are defined by security clearance, and meetings are structured to minimize exposure. The NFL has entered a phase where organizational discipline extends beyond physical preparation into the realm of information integrity. Acknowledging that strategic advantage is as much about controlling knowledge as it is about skill execution. Ultimately, the influence of leaks on games demonstrates that modern football is a sport of dual realities. Physical performance, athletic skill, and strategy continue to define outcomes, yet informational security and narrative control now play equally critical roles. Leaks, whether of playbooks, injury statuses, or tactical decisions, introduce uncertainty, pressure, and competitive imbalance that can decisively alter the trajectory of teams, seasons, and careers. In this environment, victory is contingent not only on execution, but also on the ability to safeguard knowledge and adapt to breaches, reflecting a fundamental transformation in the way the NFL operates, competes, and perceives fairness. Confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure contracts, and litigation became critical instruments in the league's effort to manage the flow of information, protect intellectual property, and preserve competitive advantage. What was once primarily a matter of internal discipline now involved courts, legal precedent, and high-stakes negotiations that could define careers, influence organizational strategy, and shape league policies. The legal fallout from leaks has created an environment in which knowledge is not only power, but also a source of liability. Non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, have long been a standard tool in professional sports. Players, coaches, staff, and even contractors are required to sign agreements prohibiting unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, whether related to contracts, playbooks, or team operations. In the era of leaks, these agreements took on heightened significance. Violations are no longer hypothetical. They carry real consequences. Breaches can result in fines, suspension, or termination, but they can also trigger civil litigation, reputational damage, and career-altering scrutiny. NDAs became both a shield and a weapon, protecting teams while providing legal leverage in disputes. Leaked medical records, for instance, raised questions about privacy rights, patient confidentiality, and compliance with federal laws such as HIPAA. Teams and players alike faced the prospect of litigation for unauthorized disclosure, prompting the league to invest in compliance programs and internal audits. Beyond regulatory compliance, leaks expose the potential for tort claims, defamation suits, and contractual disputes. The NFL had to navigate a complex intersection of privacy law, employment law, and intellectual property protections in a context where the speed of dissemination outpaced the slow grind of legal remedies. High-profile cases illustrate the stakes vividly. One incident involved a star player whose contract negotiations were disrupted by leaked messages between his agent and the team. The content of the messages suggested tension and dissatisfaction. and the leak was amplified across social media and news platforms. The players' legal team filed a civil claim alleging violation of confidentiality, breach of fiduciary duty, and reputational harm. The ensuing investigation involved multiple layers of review, including forensic examination of digital records and interviews with staff. The case underscored the growing interdependence of legal strategy and information management in the modern NFL. Legal mechanisms also expanded to address the broader ecosystem of leaks. The league began to pursue litigation not only against internal sources, but also against external parties, such as media organizations, third-party distributors, and individuals disseminating proprietary information. While freedom of the press protects many forms of reporting, strategic litigation was used to signal seriousness, deter further leaks, and establish boundaries for responsible reporting. These actions created a dual tension, protecting the league's interests while balancing the legal and ethical limitations of information control in a digital age. Confidentiality agreements extended beyond players and coaches to include equipment managers, medical staff, interns, and contractors. The recognition was clear. Every individual with access to sensitive information represented a potential liability. Teams implemented training, legal education, and monitoring protocols to mitigate risk. The proliferation of digital devices, smartphones, tablets, cloud storage required novel legal thinking, as traditional methods of enforcement were inadequate in an environment where information could be copied, transmitted, and amplified in seconds. Legal safeguards became intertwined with operational strategy, reflecting the reality that information security was no longer purely technical or organizational, but fundamentally legal in nature. Investigations into leaks also created unintended consequences. While necessary to enforce accountability, internal and external inquiries disrupted operations, strained relationships, and eroded trust. Players and staff often faced prolonged scrutiny, even when leaks were minor or unintentional. Legal processes became instruments of both deterrence and control, but also sources of tension as individuals navigated the dual obligations of compliance and personal privacy. In some cases, investigations revealed systemic weaknesses in information management, prompting league-wide reforms and policy updates. Another area of legal concern involved intellectual property. Playbooks, practice footage, and strategic planning are considered proprietary assets, and unauthorized disclosure constitutes theft or misappropriation. Teams increasingly viewed leaked material as not only a reputational issue, but also a legal violation, opening avenues for civil remedies or injunctions. The intersection of intellectual property law and competitive sports created a nuanced legal environment in which both preventive and reactive measures became essential to maintaining fairness, competitive balance, and operational integrity. The legal fallout also extended to public relations and career consequences. Players implicated in leaks, whether directly or indirectly, faced legal scrutiny that intersected with media narratives. Legal filings, investigations, and confidential settlements often became fodder for public discussion, even when specifics were protected. The ambiguity created a psychological and reputational burden. Athletes could be penalized socially or professionally despite legal processes remaining unresolved. The convergence of law, media, and perception illustrates the complex pressures created by leaks in a hyper-connected era. Contractual disputes became more complicated as well. Leaks revealing dissatisfaction, hidden clauses, or strategic discussions could influence negotiations and undermine trust. Teams leveraged legal tools to reinforce confidentiality, while players' agents adopted countermeasures, including preemptive disclosures, strategic messaging, or litigation threats. The result was a dynamic in which legal acumen became essential alongside athletic skill, negotiation strategy, and media management. Understanding rights, obligations, and potential remedies became as critical for career longevity as performance on the field. The evolving legal framework also reflects a broader cultural shift. The league recognizes that information control is inseparable from liability management. While players and staff understand that every communication carries legal implications, legal counsel has become embedded in operational strategy, and compliance officers are tasked not only with policy enforcement, but also with mitigating the reputational and competitive risks of leaks. The intersection of law and sport in this context underscores the seriousness of the issue. Leaks are no longer merely embarrassing, they are legally consequential, operationally disruptive, and career-altering. Ultimately, the legal fallout from leaks demonstrates the high stakes of information in modern football. Confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure contracts, and litigation are not just tools of control. They are essential mechanisms for navigating an environment in which knowledge can determine outcomes, influence public perception, and disrupt careers. The NFL's struggle to enforce these mechanisms highlights the tension between speed and legality, between transparency and protection, and between individual agency and organizational authority. In this landscape, success depends not only on skill, preparation, and performance, but also on understanding, navigating, and leveraging the complex legal structures that govern information in professional sports. The NFL is a world defined by performance, toughness, and resilience. But in the age of leaks and instant digital exposure, a new battlefield has emerged: the mind. The emotional toll on players living under constant scrutiny is profound, invisible, and often unacknowledged. While fans and media measure success in touchdowns, tackles, and statistics, the psychological cost of being exposed, misrepresented, or weaponized through leaked information remains largely hidden. In this environment, every decision, every comment, and every interaction carries potential consequences, creating a persistent, unseen stress that compounds the physical demands of the game. From the moment athletes step into the league, they understand the stakes of performance. What they could not anticipate was how off-field exposure, amplified by social media, leaks, and public scrutiny, would redefine pressure. In the past, personal struggles, private mistakes, or candid frustrations were contained within locker rooms or among trusted advisors. Today, a single leaked message, video clip, or image can spread worldwide within minutes, altering public perception, contract negotiations, and professional reputations. This constant vulnerability introduces a layer of mental strain that extends far beyond the routine challenges of competition. Consider the daily reality for players whose communications, personal lives, or even casual interactions are at risk of being recorded and shared. Simple conversations in hallways, on team buses, or during practice can suddenly appear online, often stripped of context. The fear of misinterpretation forces athletes into heightened vigilance, where authenticity is constrained by the awareness that every moment may be scrutinized. This form of self-monitoring generates anxiety, erodes spontaneity, and can undermine mental well-being over time, creating an invisible layer of pressure that rivals the physical demands of the sport. Locker rooms, once considered sanctuaries for strategy, camaraderie, and personal reflection, are no longer private. Players recall moments of hesitation, altering behavior to protect themselves from potential leaks. The psychological impact is significant. Athletes feel unable to express frustration, voice concerns, or engage candidly with teammates and coaches. This self-censorship disrupts trust, erodes team cohesion, and forces players to constantly balance authenticity with self-preservation. The result is a subtle but pervasive tension, in which mental energy is diverted toward risk management rather than preparation or performance. Injuries and health disclosures present another layer of emotional strain. Players live with the fear that confidential medical information, details about concussions, chronic pain, or treatment regimens might leak, influencing contracts, playing time, or public opinion. The knowledge that vulnerability could be exploited intensifies stress, leaving athletes to navigate physical recovery alongside the psychological burden of exposure. This dual pressure is compounded by the league's high-stakes culture. where durability is celebrated and weakness can be weaponized, making transparency both necessary and risky. Personal relationships are similarly affected. Athletes must weigh the consequences of communication with family, friends, or agents, understanding that casual messages could become public. This pervasive scrutiny can create isolation as players restrict interactions and limit trust to a narrow circle. The pressure to maintain a curated public image, combined with the constant possibility of exposure, contributes to anxiety, emotional fatigue, and in some cases, depression. The toll is cumulative, extending beyond the field into every aspect of a player's life. High-profile cases illustrate the mental consequences of digital vulnerability. Players who have been subjected to leaked content report feelings of betrayal, humiliation, and powerlessness. One veteran, after a video surfaced suggesting dissatisfaction with coaching, described sleepless nights, intrusive media attention, and persistent anxiety over how teammates and management would respond. While the leak was partial and contextually incomplete, the emotional impact was profound, influencing both professional performance and personal well-being. Such examples underscore that the cost of leaks is rarely financial alone. It is fundamentally human. The emotional toll also intersects with career decision-making. Players may alter behavior, avoid candid discussions, or defer negotiation strategies to minimize risk of exposure. In some cases, they make career moves, trades, retirements, or team changes based not solely on performance or opportunity, but on the mental weight of navigating a culture of constant surveillance. This invisible calculus highlights the pervasive influence of leaks, extending into both professional trajectory and life choices. Mental health resources within the NFL have evolved in response. Teams in the league have increasingly emphasized counseling, therapy, and psychological support, recognizing that emotional resilience is essential to navigating modern pressures. Yet stigma remains a barrier, and the unique stressors introduced by leaks' digital exposure, privacy invasion, and reputation management pose challenges that traditional mental health programs may not fully address. Players must navigate the intersection of competitive pressure, public scrutiny, and personal vulnerability, often without clear guidance or precedent. The culture of constant observation also amplifies the fear of judgment. Every interaction, statement, or emotional reaction can be dissected and spread. Players report heightened self-consciousness, hypervigilance, and the feeling that mistakes, however small, could be amplified into career-altering events. This state of continuous alertness can lead to exhaustion, diminished confidence, and a sense of being perpetually on trial. The NFL, once celebrated for athletic excellence, has become an environment in which mental endurance is as critical as physical conditioning. Team dynamics are further affected. Trust among players can erode when internal leaks generate suspicion, creating divisions and undermining cohesion. Leaders in locker rooms face the challenge of guiding teammates while managing the risk that private conversations may become public. Emotional labor becomes a constant requirement as athletes balance leadership, performance, and the psychological weight of information exposure. In this context, mental health and team culture are inseparable, with leaks serving as both a symptom and cause of underlying tension. In addition to individual impact, the broader league culture shifts under the weight of digital vulnerability. Front offices, coaches, and staff are acutely aware of the emotional fragility created by constant exposure, and policies increasingly reflect the need to manage information flow responsibly. Yet the structural pressures of competition, media demand, and organizational ambition continue to create environments in which leaks are both likely and consequential. Players operate at the intersection of personal vulnerability and professional expectation, navigating a world in which emotional resilience has become a strategic necessity. Ultimately, the emotional toll of leaks represents a hidden cost of modern professional football. While fans see highlight reels, statistics, and televised drama, the mental burden of constant exposure remains largely invisible. Athletes endure anxiety, stress, and heightened self-monitoring as part of their daily lives, managing risks that extend far beyond the physical game. Understanding the human dimension of these pressures reveals the profound complexity of the modern NFL, where information is weaponized, privacy is scarce, and emotional resilience is an essential component of survival. The convergence of public exposure, internal scrutiny, and digital vulnerability has reshaped the experience of players, challenging assumptions about toughness and revealing a hidden battlefield within the league. The emotional consequences of leaks are enduring, influencing performance, relationships, and career trajectories, and forcing athletes to navigate a landscape in which every move, spoken word, and private moment carries potential repercussions. The NFL stands at the threshold of a transformation more profound than any rule change or technological innovation in its history. For decades, the league operated on the assumption that some aspects of the game, the inner workings of teams, private negotiations, locker room interactions, and player vulnerabilities could be managed, contained, or controlled. Today, that assumption is increasingly obsolete. The pace of information dissemination has accelerated beyond human capacity to manage it, and the boundaries between public and private, between perception and reality, are collapsing. The future NFL is one in which transparency is not optional but inevitable, where information moves faster than truth, and where the league, its teams, and its players must operate in a world without secrets. This emerging reality is already reshaping organizational strategy. Teams must now anticipate that every internal decision, from play calling to personnel management, could be observed, recorded, or leaked at any moment. Front offices invest heavily in cybersecurity, monitoring, and digital hygiene. Yet the decentralized nature of modern communication makes complete containment impossible. Even the most sophisticated systems cannot fully prevent leaks when information exists simultaneously across personal devices, cloud platforms, and social media channels. As a result, secrecy is no longer a reliable defensive measure. Transparency has become both a risk and a necessity. For players, this new landscape presents both opportunity and peril. On one hand, instant access to audiences allows athletes to assert control over their narratives, counter misinformation, and engage directly with fans in ways unimaginable in prior eras. On the other hand, the unrelenting visibility magnifies every misstep, mistake, or moment of vulnerability. A single misinterpreted statement can spread globally in minutes, potentially reshaping public perception and career trajectories. Athletes are now forced to cultivate skills beyond physical performance. Media literacy, strategic communication, and digital awareness are as critical as training and preparation. The modern NFL player must master both the game and the information ecosystem surrounding it. The league's institutions are adapting, but the challenge is cultural as much as technological. Historically, teams relied on hierarchical control, trusted intermediaries, and formal communication channels to manage sensitive information. That model is no longer sufficient. Employees at every level, from coaches to equipment staff, have access to devices capable of broadcasting confidential material instantly. The culture of discretion is being replaced by a culture of accountability and real-time transparency. Teams must reconcile competitive secrecy with public scrutiny, understanding that operational mistakes, internal conflicts, or injury details can no longer be fully contained. This shift also has implications for competitive balance. If information moves faster than truth, strategic advantage may increasingly hinge on adaptability rather than mere preparation. Coaches may employ modular game plans, randomized rotations, or flexible formations designed to minimize the risk posed by leaked information. Players may be trained to improvise, adjust on the fly, and anticipate that opponents might possess partial insights. The game itself could evolve to accommodate the reality that information is fluid, malleable, and inescapable, fundamentally altering how football is conceptualized at the highest levels. The fan experience will evolve as well. Social media and instant reporting mean audiences expect access to every aspect of the league's operations. Fans, analysts, and independent investigators will continue to unearth details at unprecedented speed, shaping narratives before teams can respond. While this democratization of information increases engagement, it also challenges traditional storytelling and league authority. The NFL must navigate a delicate balance between fostering fan connection and maintaining organizational integrity, a challenge without precedent in professional sports history. Legal frameworks will continue to play a critical role. NDAs, confidentiality agreements, and litigation will remain essential tools for managing leaks, yet they will face new pressure in a hyper-transparent world. Courts may be called upon to adjudicate disputes over leaked content with greater frequency, while the ethical and practical boundaries of enforcement will be tested. Legal mechanisms alone will not suffice. They must be paired with cultural and technological adaptations that recognize the inevitability of exposure. The league's future success depends on a sophisticated integration of policy, education, and proactive communication. Players' mental and emotional resilience will become increasingly critical. Constant exposure, combined with rapid dissemination of both accurate and inaccurate information, creates ongoing psychological pressure. Athletes must balance authenticity with caution, assertiveness with prudence, and public engagement with privacy. Emotional intelligence, media savvy, and strategic foresight will become central components of career longevity, alongside physical fitness, tactical knowledge, and technical skill. The human element, the ability to navigate perception, expectation, and vulnerability will be as determinative of success as any physical attribute. Ethical considerations will also define the league's evolution. Transparency brings accountability, but also ethical dilemmas. How much access is appropriate for fans, media, and third parties? How should teams balance player privacy with public interest? What are the moral responsibilities of employees, journalists, and athletes in a world where every action can be broadcast and scrutinized instantly? These questions will shape policies, culture, and norms within the NFL, redefining the relationship between the league, its players, and its audience. Innovation in information management will accelerate. Teams may adopt encrypted communication systems, secure internal networks, and real-time monitoring of sensitive data. Players may receive training in digital hygiene, message control, and crisis communication. Analysts and strategists may develop new methodologies to assess the impact of leaks on competitive advantage, blending technology, psychology, and tactical planning. The future NFL will be a league in which information strategy is as integral to preparation as physical conditioning, where victory depends on the effective management of both performance and perception. Despite these challenges, the inevitability of exposure may also drive positive transformation. Transparency can foster accountability, reduce corruption, and highlight systemic issues that previously remained hidden. Injuries, misconduct, and internal mismanagement may be revealed more rapidly, prompting reform and protective measures. Players, fans, and teams can engage in a more informed dialogue, creating a culture of responsibility alongside innovation. The league's evolution in this domain will test not only competitive skill, but also institutional adaptability, ethical judgment, and cultural resilience. Looking ahead, the NFL will exist in a state of perpetual negotiation between secrecy and openness, control and vulnerability. Every decision, interaction, and strategic choice carries potential implications beyond the field. The game will increasingly reflect a dual reality, one where physical excellence remains paramount and another where mastery of information, narrative, and transparency define success. Teams that navigate this landscape effectively will thrive, while those unable to adapt risk being left behind not by talent alone, but by the pace, volume, and complexity of the information flowing around them. The future of professional football, therefore, is inseparable from the flow of information. The next decade promises an NFL in which no secret is safe. Every leak carries consequence, and every stakeholder, player, coach, front office, and fan operates in a high-velocity, hyper-transparent environment. Adaptation, resilience, and strategic foresight will define success. While the vulnerabilities exposed by a single notification, a shared video, or a leaked message may determine failure. In this world, the old boundaries between public and private, competition and disclosure, control and chaos no longer exist. The game beyond the game has become the defining arena, and the league of the future must contend with it as its most formidable opponent. The NFL will survive, adapt, and innovate. But it will do so in a landscape where transparency is the rule, not the exception, and where information flows faster than truth. In the next era, secrecy will be a relic, and the players, coaches, and executives who navigate the new reality with skill, strategy, and psychological acuity will define the legacies of both the league and the athletes themselves. The NFL, once defined by the physicality of the game, the roar of stadiums, and the carefully orchestrated drama of on-field competition, has undergone a profound transformation in the age of instant exposure. The very nature of the league, the strategies, the narratives, and the relationships that underpin it has been irrevocably altered by a single, inescapable reality. In the digital era, no secret remains private. The proliferation of social media, smartphones, and the insatiable appetite for immediate information has created an environment in which leaks are no longer anomalies but inevitabilities. What once unfolded behind closed doors, in locker rooms and executive offices, now has the potential to be broadcast to the world in an instant. And in that exposure, the NFL has found itself navigating a landscape where trust is fragile, loyalty is conditional, and privacy has become an increasingly rare commodity. Reflecting on the history of the league, it is clear that the past and the present exist in stark contrast. The NFL of the pre-digital age operated on assumptions that are now obsolete, that communications could be controlled, that information could be managed, and that narratives could be guided by public relations teams and league officials. Leaks did occur, certainly, but they were sporadic and contained. The physicality of the game was the dominant concern. Now, the most decisive plays are often made not on the field, but in the unseen flow of information, the decisions surrounding what is revealed, what is withheld, and how quickly a story spreads. The game behind the game, the hidden currents of knowledge, influence, and disclosure, has become as consequential as any play, any drive, or any championship. The transformation has affected every layer of the league. Players once able to compartmentalize public and private life now exist in a constant state of vigilance. Every conversation, every message, every gesture has the potential to be recorded, shared, and interpreted out of context. The mental and emotional burden of this reality cannot be overstated. Anxiety, stress, and hyper-awareness have become routine companions for athletes who must balance performance with the management of perception. The locker room, long a sanctuary for camaraderie, strategy, and emotional release, has become a space fraught with the possibility of exposure. Teams have had to reconsider their approach to internal communication, developing new protocols and educational programs to safeguard information, yet the challenge remains ongoing and complex. Front offices, coaches, and staff face a parallel struggle. Every operational decision carries a dual weight: the tactical impact on the team's performance and the potential consequences if the decision becomes public prematurely or misrepresented. Contract negotiations, medical disclosures, internal discussions, and disciplinary measures now exist under a microscope. Confidentiality agreements, NDAs, and litigation have become standard tools, not only to protect proprietary information, but also to assert authority and manage risk. Legal mechanisms, however, can only do so much. In an environment where a single phone can bypass security measures, the human element, the vigilance, discretion, and judgment of individuals remains both a critical asset and a constant vulnerability. The role of leaks in shaping the league extends beyond individual consequences. Entire seasons can be influenced by the uncontrolled flow of information. Opponents armed with leaked strategic plans, injury updates, or internal assessments gain advantages that cannot be neutralized by physical talent alone. The outcomes of games, playoff positioning, and even Super Bowl victories are, in part, contingent upon the integrity of information management. The notion of fairness, of preparation based purely on athletic skill and strategic planning, has been challenged. In the modern NFL, information has become a competitive weapon. And the ability to protect it or to adapt in the face of exposure has become a defining feature of organizational success. Equally transformative is the effect on public perception and media engagement. The immediacy of digital platforms ensures that narratives form and spread with unprecedented speed. Context is often secondary to circulation, and incomplete information can shape reputations as decisively as verified facts. Players who once controlled their public personas through careful messaging now find themselves responding to a torrent of external interpretations, rumors, and social media speculation. The NFL itself, despite significant investment in public relations and communication strategies, has discovered that controlling the narrative in a hyper-connected world is no longer fully possible. The league's stories, once carefully curated, are now authored by every individual with a smartphone, every fan with an account, and every analyst with a platform. The consequences extend into culture and organizational dynamics. Trust, once implicit, must now be continuously earned. Relationships between players, coaches, and executives are filtered through a lens of information security. The smallest breach, intentional or accidental, can fracture loyalty, disrupt cohesion, and undermine authority. Ethical dilemmas have multiplied. What is appropriate to share? What must remain private? And how should mistakes be handled in an environment where public judgment is instantaneous and relentless? The NFL operates now in a state of perpetual negotiation between transparency and confidentiality, between exposure and discretion. Yet, there is also resilience within this transformation. The league, its teams, and its athletes have adapted in remarkable ways. Players have learned to navigate digital platforms strategically, leveraging the speed of information to assert control over their narratives, defend their reputations, and communicate directly with fans. Teams have developed sophisticated security protocols, internal education programs, and layered contingency strategies to minimize the risks associated with leaks. Legal frameworks provide tools for accountability, while cultural adaptation emphasizes awareness, vigilance, and ethical responsibility. In this evolving landscape, success is defined not solely by athletic performance, but by the ability to manage information, perception, and human relationships with equal skill and sophistication. The emotional dimension of this evolution cannot be overlooked. Athletes bear the mental weight of constant surveillance and the potential for rapid exposure. Anxiety, hypervigilance, and emotional fatigue have become routine companions for players, navigating a landscape in which privacy is no longer guaranteed. The psychological demands of the modern NFL are as formidable as the physical ones, shaping how athletes prepare, perform, and engage with teammates, fans, and the media. Mental resilience, emotional intelligence, and adaptive strategy are now integral components of professional football, as essential as speed, strength, and technical skill. The long-term impact of this new era of exposure is profound. Trust has been reshaped, loyalty has become conditional, and privacy is now a scarce and valuable commodity. The league can never return to the days of protected secrets, of closed locker rooms, and of curated narratives entirely under internal control. The very structures that defined the NFL in previous decades' hierarchical authority, centralized messaging, and compartmentalized knowledge have been supplanted by a culture in which information flows freely, rapidly, and often unpredictably. The game itself remains, in essence, football, but the environment in which it is played, discussed, and experienced has been fundamentally transformed. Ultimately, what remains in the wake of this transformation is a league defined not just by athletic excellence, but by adaptability, resilience, and strategic foresight. The game behind the game, the management of information, the navigation of leaks, the negotiation of public perception has become an arena of competition in its own right. Players, coaches, and executives operate simultaneously on two planes: the physical contest on the field and the informational contest beyond it. The legacies of careers, the outcomes of seasons, and the reputations of individuals are now inseparable from this dual reality. As the NFL continues to evolve, the stakes are higher than ever. Every interaction, decision, and disclosure carries consequences beyond the immediate context. Privacy, trust, and loyalty remain fragile, and the emotional, legal, and strategic pressures associated with leaks will continue to shape the league for decades. Yet within this complexity lies the essence of the modern NFL, a league that is unflinching, adaptive, and resilient, confronting the relentless velocity of information with the same determination, discipline, and intensity that define every drive, every tackle, and every championship. In the end, the story of the NFL in the era of leaks is not one of decline or chaos, but of transformation. It is a narrative of adaptation, of new rules written not in playbooks but in protocols, contracts, and communication strategies. It is a story of human endurance, as players and staff navigate pressures both visible and invisible. And it is above all a reflection on the inescapable reality of the modern world. In a landscape where information flows faster than truth, where exposure is inevitable, and where the game behind the game has become as consequential as the one played on the field, the NFL stands as both a mirror and a measure of our times. What remains, when every secret is exposed and every moment can be public, is the resilience of those who continue to play, to lead, and to compete. The spectacle endures, but so does the complexity, the emotional weight, and the human dimension of the sport. The game behind the game is now the story itself, and in navigating that story, the league, its players, and its audiences confront a truth that is simultaneously sobering and exhilarating. The NFL of the future is a league without secrets, a league where information and perception are as vital as speed and skill, and a league defined not only by the contests on the field, but by the enduring human spirit that meets every challenge beyond it. This is the NFL we live with today, and this is the league that will shape tomorrow. Its legacy is not only measured in victories and championships, but in the stories that emerge when the floodgates of information open, when privacy is no longer guaranteed, and when the game behind the game becomes the story itself. Every player, every team, and every decision now exists in that dual reality. And within it lies the future of professional football, uncompromising, unrelenting, and profoundly human.